Call this evening's regularly scheduled town board meeting to order for December 11th, 2017 at 7:10 p.m. Ms. Eicher, will you please proceed with roll call?
Mayor Christy Melendez.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Miles Baker. Cindy Showerman.
Here.
Ken Bennett.
Here.
Paul Rennemeyer.
Here.
Ivan Adams.
Here.
Mr. Rennemeyer, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And before we start tonight's meeting, tonight many of you are here for the discussion of a very personal and emotional issue on the agenda before us. Before we officially commence with tonight's meeting, I want to provide some assurances and some parameters which we will follow to ensure the respect and decorum is followed at all times to allow all parties a fair hearing and opportunity to present their case. I want to attest to this board's ability to operate in a fair and unbiased manner, and want to assure you it is the policy of this board to assure that the due process rights of all persons are protected during these hearing proceedings. This very process outlines for us the ruling that only the testimony and facts heard tonight will be considered, and which we will draw conclusions from to serve as the foundation to our eventual action. These rules are intended to assure that the decision-making on quasi-judicial matters are based upon facts and evidence known to both parties. Public input is encouraged and a function of this important process. And for a mutually respectful and courteous process to occur, I would ask that the following be observed. No outbursts or disruptive noises, such as clapping or cheering, will be tolerated from the public, nor speaking out of order from your seats. Please, as and when recognized, step up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and then proceed. Each party will have a 3-minute limit of public speaking. And please note, repeating the same sentiment or example over and over is best served as stating your position has already been stated and you concur, rather than unnecessarily giving us repetition. Again, this process commends respect from all sides, even those with whom you disagree. It is part of the process. And so we will continue then this evening with our first item, which is review of agenda by the board and addition of items of new business to the agenda for consideration by the board. Are there any additions to the agenda before us? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda as printed tonight.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer and a second from Mr. Adams, approving the agenda as presented. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Okay. And the agenda is approved as presented. Item number 4, board liaison reports. Town Board Member Showerman, Water and Sewer Board, and Clearview Library Board.
The Water and Sewer Board will be meeting Wednesday at 6:30 in the morning. The Library Board met on the 30th, and they had asked for community input on the vote regarding the new library. And there were about 15 to 20 people in attendance, but only 6 people spoke on the matter. And then they also recapped their 2017 year and set goals and planning for 2018 year, One of the things they mentioned is that they are looking for members of their foundation board, if anyone in the community is interested in that. And they also did their second reading and final adoption of their budget, which is roughly $2.5 million for the 2018 fiscal year, and about 62% of that is attributed to staff salaries and related expenses.
Okay. Town Board Member Bennett, Planning Commission and Windsor Housing Authority.
The Planning Commission met last Wednesday evening. They addressed item number 4 and 9 on our agenda tonight, which was the amended municipal code and grasslands subdivision. They also did, they revised or reviewed site plans for East Point, Human Being, Eagle Crossing Fuzzies, Falcon Point Storage, and West Village Independent Living. The Housing Authority has not met since our last meeting.
Okay. Town Board Member Rennemeyer, Historic Preservation Commission, Great Western Trail Authority, and Chamber of Commerce.
I do not have any reports tonight. The Historic Preservation Commission and the Chamber of Commerce both hold their monthly board meetings on Wednesday, which I will be attending.
Okay. And Town Board Member Adams, Tree Board and Poudre River Trail Corridor Board.
The tree board met last week, and Eric Lucas, the director of Parks, Recreation, and Culture, came and gave us an update on the vision and mission statement that we've been working on for quite a while, and it was voted on and approved, so we're ready to go with that. And he also gave an update on the budget, and it was approved. So those were two things that we were wanting to get done. And then the other thing, Caitlin with the Art and Heritage Center came to give us a report on the exhibit that's going to be held on, well, let me think of it, the Arbor Day celebration. And she said that she already has planned on 400 exhibits from the kids throughout the district, making the posters and the poetry that they do, and she's planning for 400 of them. So that's neat, and I think we'll get the 400. So as far as the Poudre Trail Board, it was supposed to have met last Thursday, but they rescheduled it to this Thursday, so I don't have a report. We'll be meeting 7 o'clock Thursday morning.
Okay. And I have Downtown Development Authority, which I don't have anything new to report this evening, and North Front Range MPO. Most of North Front Range MPO, we were in an executive session concerning personnel. However, a couple of things, we did have a CDOT Region 4 report. So the project for I-25, which goes from Prospect to 402, a contractor was selected. That's the good news. The bad news is we are $30 million over budget, and so they are looking at to make some major cuts and perhaps reduce the scope. The other option is to pull back and cancel the project and go out for an RFP later in 2018. I think the route that they're going to take is to see if they can maybe reduce and make cuts, and then along the way, hopefully do some negotiating with the contractor to see if there isn't potential to pull some of those projects that we may have to cut at the beginning to bring those back in eventually. So along those lines, the Denver Chamber of Commerce is looking at a tax increase. As we all know, transportation and funding, there is not a funding mechanism, which is what slows the process for transportation projects and maintenance to occur in the state of Colorado. So perhaps the chamber is looking at maybe they may file something by the end of January for a tax increase, a percentage that would be allocated strictly to transportation. And as part of that, I will be attending on Friday a private meeting with Senator Gardner, who is hosting a meeting for transportation. It's directly about transportation, what those issues are, and hopefully perhaps maybe to look at what some solutions could be. The other thing that we had at North Front Range on Thursday night was election, and so I have been elected to be the vice chair of 2018 for the North Front Range MPO, and then I will become the incoming chair for 2019. So, another position. And that concludes my report. Item 5 is the public invited to be heard. This is for individuals who are wishing to participate on a non-agenda item. You were requested to sign up on the form out in the foyer, and when you are recognized, step up to the podium. However, it looks like most of the folks who signed up this evening, if I'm correct, all signed up to talk about an issue on the agenda. If that is not correct, and you wish to speak to the board on a non-agenda item, would you raise your hand so I can recognize you? Okay. Then we will move on to item B, which is the consent calendar. It's fairly lengthy this evening with 9 items, so I won't go through the trouble of reading each and every one, but I would look for a motion.
Madam Mayor, I would move that we approve the consent calendar as printed.
Second?
Motion on the floor from Mr. Adams and a second from Mr. Bennett approving the consent calendar as presented. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the calendar has been approved as presented. Moving on then to item C and official board action. Our first item this evening is a public hearing. A public hearing regards to ordinance number 2017-1548. An ordinance rezoning Eagle Crossing subdivision, second filing, Tract B, Eagle Crossing subdivision, third filing, Tracts A and Tract B, and Fossil Ridge subdivision, second filing, Lot 4, Block 11, Tom Siegel, Eagle Crossing Windsor LLC, the applicant, John Myers, TST Incorporated Consulting Engineers, the applicant's representative. This is quasi-judicial. Mr. Hornbeck will be giving presentation, and I would seek a motion to open public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I move that we open public hearing.
Second?
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer, and a second from Ms. Sharman to open public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Okay.
It's not picking up the votes. We can do a verbal vote.
Okay. All in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, public hearing is now open. Mr. Hornbeck.
Did you my little thing?
Oh, followed by Mr. Bennett.
Madam Mayor, for the record, I would like to point out that in my capacity as Town Board Liaison to the Planning Commission, I was present at the Planning Commission meeting during which this matter was previously presented. I wish to state that my participation in the Planning Commission proceedings has in no way influenced me in my capacity as a Town Board member this evening. I will make my decision and cast my vote this evening based solely on the evidence presented during this public hearing.
Okay, Mr. Hornbeck, please proceed.
Good evening, Mayor, Town Board. This rezone request has been reviewed in accordance with Article 5, Chapter 16 of the Municipal Code. The subject rezoning consists of approximately 60 acres within portions of the Eagle Crossing subdivision, second and third filings, and the Fossil Ridge subdivision, second filing. The subject properties are located generally northeast of the intersection of Crossroads Boulevard and Fairgrounds Avenue. The request is to rezone approximately 32 acres from limited industrial to high-density multifamily, or MF2, and approximately 28 acres from limited industrial to general commercial. The existing zoning of the site is limited industrial, as shown by the area outlined. The proposed zoning, again, a portion of the site would go to general commercial, another portion to multifamily. The current limited industrial zoning of the site reflects the fact that for many years this part of Windsor was envisioned primarily as industrial given the proximity of the Walmart distribution center and the Ward Business Park and the lack of sewer in the area. The current zoning of industrial permits a variety of uses, including various types of manufacturing, warehousing, automobile body shops, and all other uses that would be allowed under the general commercial zone district. The purpose of this rezoning is to allow for the construction of a multifamily development at the future intersection of Steeplechase Drive and Ward Avenue, approximately this location. A preliminary site plan, the secondary purpose of this rezoning is to better align the zoning of the remaining land for the future Brands East development. A preliminary site plan was approved by Planning Commission in October. The final site plan will require action by Planning Commission and Town Board for the multifamily development. Staff is concurrently reviewing the Brands East Planned Unit Development, or PUD, overlay zoning. And per municipal code's requirements, the PUD rezoning requires an underlying zoning to remain in place. So that is proposed to be the general commercial, and the PUD would be before you at a future date to enact different standards on top of the general commercial standards. The Brands East is proposed to be predominantly commercial, so that's the reason for the request of general commercial. And again, that PUD would require public hearings before Planning Commission and Town Board. I do want to note that this rezoning request needs to be considered on the basis of its own merit, and any action by Town Board should be based on compliance of the rezoning with the comprehensive plan, and it should not be based on any details of the site plan that may be presented. It also should not be based on any testimony by the applicant or the members of the public that is not germane to the comprehensive plan. This rezoning represents a redesign project that was based on neighbor feedback of a previously proposed rezoning on properties located to the east of the current proposal. So that was, again, just to the east of what's proposed now. And the Fossil Ridge subdivision second filing rezoning was considered by Planning Commission in April of this year. There was opposition to that project by neighboring property owners, and the Planning Commission voted to forward a recommendation of approval to Town Board. However, the Planning Commission voted against forwarding a recommendation of approval to Town Board. In response to that outcome, the applicants did withdraw their request to reconsider and have come back with this revised proposal before you tonight. There are a number of changes that have occurred since that have attempted to address some of the neighbor concerns. Again, the current proposal pushes the project further to the west, allowing a buffer to the single-family homes east of Highland Meadows Parkway. The proposal leaves at least one future development lot between the multifamily zoning and the Highland Meadows Parkway. Existing homes at the intersection of Highland Meadows Parkway and Hialeah Drive are approximately 600 feet from the boundary of the rezoning. And so that intersection, I believe, is this one, which is really the closest intersection. The intersection of Steeplechase Drive and Highland Meadows Parkway, those homes are approximately 1,200 feet from the zone boundary proposed. Another change is the proposal uses lower building heights with two-story buildings on the easternmost portion of the property that transition to three-story buildings on the west. And finally, the City of Loveland has installed a traffic signal at the intersection of Ward Avenue and Crossroads Boulevard. This was installed to provide better access for Walmart trucks accessing the site, but it would also serve the multifamily development to the north by providing a controlled intersection particularly important for left turns into and out of the site. The applicant has also provided a traffic impact study with a site plan to assess the impacts of development. The rezoning plat is the technical document for the rezoning, which reflects the previous slide before you. The consistency with the comprehensive plan is analyzed in the following slides. The project is consistent with Chapter 5C, the Residential Areas Framework Plan. The goal, which states support diverse housing and residential neighborhoods to meet the needs of varying family sizes, lifestyles, and income levels. It's also consistent with Objective 4, foster a diversity of housing types and sizes through coordinated land use planning and zoning. And Objective 5, support high-density residential development near downtown, commercial centers, and mixed-use nodes. The staff analysis of those items is as follows. The comprehensive plan identifies lack of housing diversity as an area upon which Windsor needs to improve. According to the plan, 82% of Windsor's housing units are detached single-family units. The plan acknowledges this will remain the predominant pattern, but highlights the importance of a more diverse housing stock. It goes on to state, this includes the development of townhomes, multifamily, and mixed-use products that are both owner and renter occupied. These uses are best placed near commercial areas to encourage walkability and serve as a land use transition to single-family residential neighborhoods. These housing product options will appeal to young families, downsizing retirees, senior citizens, and others that do not desire large single-family homes on large maintenance-intensive lots. And that's from the comprehensive plan. The multifamily housing that's proposed with the subject property would provide more housing options and would be located in close proximity to a commercial area known as the Brands East, which is proposed in addition to this development and will require those separate hearings previously alluded to. Chapter 5D, the Commercial and Industrial Areas Framework Plan. The goal states maintain the character of the community while accommodating future growth that is fiscally and environmentally responsible. And staff analysis on that is as follows. The portion of the site proposed to be rezoned from limited industrial to general commercial should help ensure development maintains the character of the surrounding area due to the commercial nature of the Fairgrounds corridor. The proposal to rezone the acreage from industrial to multifamily would be a negligible loss of potential commercial industrial tax base for the area, as there would still be over 200 acres of undeveloped commercially or industrially zoned property in the surrounding area. The infusion of additional residents may also help spur additional commercial development and associated tax revenue for the town. Additionally, the location of residential development in close proximity to commercial development is a model that's been shown to reduce the amount and distance of vehicle trips, thereby having positive environmental impacts. The application is also consistent with the strategic plan, particularly prosperous local economy and safe, well-planned community with spirit and pride. The applicant's representatives held a neighborhood meeting in August of this year. The notifications for that meeting were done in accordance with the municipal code and sent to property owners on the map before you. There were a number of public comments received with this proposal, emails and letters that were included in your packet. There was one additional email received late this afternoon that was not included in opposition to the project, so I would like to enter that into the record and can provide that to you all. At their October 18th, 2017 meeting, the Planning Commission forwarded a recommendation of approval of the rezoning petition and ordinance to Town Board, subject to all remaining Planning Commission and staff comments being addressed. Staff requests the following be entered into the record: application and supplemental materials, staff memorandum and supporting documents, all testimony received during the public hearing, and the recommendation. I do want to note the applicants are present. If you wish to hear from them, that's all I have for you.
Did the applicant wish to come forward?
Hi, good evening, Mayor, Council. Martin Lynn, 1625 Pelican Lakes Point. We are here tonight for the rezoning of this property, and we have a PowerPoint here, I think. Brian, is it set up? Okay, perfect, thank you. Hi, good evening. We're here for the Eagle Crossing fourth filing rezone. The area map, Paul did a great job of describing where this is, but basically fairgrounds to Highland Meadows Parkway north of Crossroads Boulevard. A little bit of history about this property. It was annexed to Windsor back several decades ago with the intent of creating pretty strategic boundary and for Windsor to get out to as far close to the interstate, which we did accomplish with this rezoning or with this annexation. I was not part of the annexation at that time. Other developers were part of that. And at that era in Windsor, because of the predecessing of Walmart and the Ward complex that was annexed in Loveland, it was envisioned that this area was going to be heavy industrial. With the incubation and success of the Budweiser Event Center and the ranch, it became very apparent that this area and the corridor was going to become a very important front door to both Loveland and Windsor, and not necessarily a heavy industrial back door. Centerra evolved over the next couple decades, and with the work that they did with high-end auto complex up on Crossroads, that area also evolved into a very appealing front door for Loveland on that side. So with the pause button of the recession for about a decade and the incubation of the brands, the business assistance that we received from both Loveland and Windsor, we've relooked at this entire area and worked very hard with staff last decade on the comprehensive plan, and all of the work that was cooked into the sausage of that plan. Windsor envisioned this also now to be an important corridor for sales tax collection and also commercial. So with that, we got the brands retooled. We redesigned almost 300 acres in Loveland and Windsor, completely threw away the old plans. And we're here before you taking away what I would be considered a fairly easy and simple way to develop this area in cookie cutter industrial sites of 1 to 2 to 5 acres, typical to what we see south of this area along here. But that's not the right thing for this to happen. And we have a very, very nice, attractive area going on in Windsor with Highland Meadows, great neighborhoods. And at this junction right here, it just turns into industrial. No more trees, no more tree lining, on-site detention, no regional planning. And so our project is, as you've seen before, regionally planned. It's a master plan for the brands. And in that, we're requesting this change of zone to residential to stay consistent with the idea that people can live close to where they're going to shop. And the comprehensive plan spent a lot of time studying that. The plan that is skeletized here in the front is this building envelopes. Mini storage is presumed right here south of this to help facilitate these people's storage needs. But then again, we're anticipating grocery. One of the applications tonight in on the brands is a new fast casual Mexican food, Fuzzy Tacos, right on this corner. The Summit Entertainment. This will be bringing Steeplechase through over towards Fairgrounds with the plat, not on the zoning tonight, but eventually with the plat. And the original plan, skip forward just a little bit. The original plan that we came before the Planning Commission with had the units, the residential request up along the Parkway. We heard a lot of resistance to that from the neighborhood, and there was an awful lot of requests to leave that light industrial. I personally don't think that's a good use and a compatible use, but to honor the request of the neighborhood, we came up with a new plan. We slid it to the back, and we left this area light industrial. I would make it on the record that I don't think that's the right thing to do, but that's not for tonight's decisions. They also had a request to more define the site plan, the architecture, and get back to the concerns of the neighborhood. So the desire for light industrial, we have accomplished that, and we've left that on the east side. The traffic concerns, we did a full-blown traffic study for this site for the Planning Commission. And not to bore you with all the details, it's a public record now, we filed that. But the property will develop, be it industrial or be it commercial, it will develop. And the residential develops out at a lighter traffic intensity than would be industrial. And what's not shown on this statistic right here is the bar graph of traffic. Blue being residential, daytime and nighttime trips, red being industrial. But what's not shown here is that the blue is residential cars that you typically would see in a residential neighborhood. The orange is a heavy industrial traffic, which consists of trucks, trailers, much heavier, louder. So staying with the fact that the property will be developed, this actually does lower the traffic impact to that area. One of the last concerns, not last, there was a lot of concerns about multifamily being over there, but one of the last concerns was height restriction. Our current zoning on this property in most of the area allows us a 75-foot height use by right. This lowers that down to below 35 feet. We continue to restrict the site even more on this side and went to 2-story only here, so it's even under 30 feet. So the purpose of trying to accommodate all that is to bring some harmony into rezoning. Rezonings are emotional, rezonings are tough, but this property over here, when it came into Windsor, needed to rezone from agricultural, and to put residential next to industrial is never ever a good land use. But residential is a great use over there. It's a fantastic use, and it's developed great. So we're here tonight to honor the respect of the people that worked on the comprehensive plan, to follow it through, to follow with good common sense planning of putting the commercial adjacent to some higher density multifamily so these people can bike and walk over and get their services. The trip generations are done by an accredited traffic engineer, proven that we've lowered the impact to the area. We've retooled and removed the property that was very inflammatory, and we've moved it back significantly in the property. We are requesting a multifamily MF2. One of the concerns was that was too dense, but the actual physical site plan that we're proposing and submitting is just a smidgen over the MF1. It's 18.8. If it was 18.0, we would be asking for an MF1. It just happened to be that's where we fit on the site plan. So it is a MF2 zoning, but in reality, the physical property will be developed out nearly identical to MF1. Some of the concerns and myths about multifamily are about overburdening schools. Single-family homes produce 51 school-aged children, 100 of them. 100 same apartments produce 31. Apartment owners oftentimes pay more taxes because it's run as a commercial project, and high-density development has utility systems that are far more efficient. They don't have big lawns, and it's just basically factually a more efficient way to live. We do need a diversity in Windsor of housing. We haven't had a good diversity, and part of that is because single-family development seems to have an easier path to entry, and multifamily needs big investors and big operators to run it, and we just haven't had that in Windsor. So housing studies, one of the concerns was that these would lower property values. In fact, the last letter that you received tonight, we received a copy of it at 5 o'clock as well. There's no statistics to do that. In fact, the facts prove that that's an unfounded fear. And so we firmly believe that this does not harm any values. And those of you that have been here and are familiar with Water Valley and with Raindance, we blended properties. We put high density and medium density and low density in the RMU so that we could create that blend of opportunity for people that want to live in Windsor. Social aspects of multifamily projects, renters socialize with their neighbors more. It's kind of a given. They're closer, they live closer. They're involved in activities. The rents in Windsor area are some of the highest in northern Colorado. Some of that has to do with product availability. A lot of it has to do with desirability. People want to live in Windsor. There's just not a very good opportunity. So this is not going to be low income. This is not going to be entry level. This is going to be young professionals, retirees. This is going to be people that can afford to live in a very great place. An issue that came up last week was crime, or excuse me, at the Planning Commission was crime, and the myth that multifamily creates a higher crime. So we physically did a study with Weld County on the dispatch and brought it down, boiled it down to Windsor by specific location. It's almost real-time data. This was collected from October 23rd of 16 to October 23rd of 17. There was a total of 282 calls. We called out the ones that went to an intersection of an address, because that was probably a car wreck, and also all traffic violations, excuse me. What that brings down is these are the cases for the calls: assaults, burglary, what have you. Single family was 39% of the calls in Windsor. RMU, which would be typical Water Valley or mixed use projects, were 30. Multifamily was 8. The only thing lower than multifamily was estates, high-end, low-density estates. So that's real-time information, factual data out of Weld County and our Windsor Police Department. The major subdivision we're asking for tonight creates 3 lots, 8 tracks. We are dedicating, of course, as you do any plat, nearly 10 acres of land at no cost, shrinking the project by 10 acres for the street that's open to the public. We're building a giant regional stormwater that will become part of a big open space project that will actually have paths that will let people that live in the Fossil Ridge and Highland Meadows area have public access by bike and pedestrian all the way over to the ranch. And this aligns with our Brands East master plan. Area of major subdivisions here. There's a hotel under construction right in this area. Again, back to the master plan, the new site plan, elevations. There's a masonry component on the front, the lower level 2 stories that are on the east end, and a big regional clubhouse for this area, swimming pools, fitness centers, meeting rooms, etc. This is a very high-end project. It's going to be an excellent amenity to Windsor if we're approved, and we're excited about the opportunity to present tonight. I will defer. I would request to come back if there's any new questions that came up that I didn't answer from the public. I would like an opportunity to come back and answer those, if I may.
Okay, Mr. McCarter.
Just a point for the record, is Mr. Lind asking that all of these slides, all of this material be incorporated into the record?
Yes. And then also I have one more. This was to address that letter that came in tonight that we didn't really have time to put in the presentation, but that's from Truell. It's a study on what happens to property values around high-density multifamily that has a Section 8. This property is not Section 8. Section 8, by definition, is not a place. It's a voucher that you get from the Department from Housing that has to do with the area study of affordability. So the letter tonight said that they had moved out of a place that had Section 8 move in, and so that was a confirmation that it does not do what the letter was indicating. So I'll defer to the public hearing. Thank you.
So if there's no further presentation at this point, we are in the public hearing portion, and we will open it up to the public hearing. So those who would like to come forward, raise your hand, and when recognized, step up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and then we will start the timer for the 3 minutes. Okay?
Evening. My name is Michael Getman. I live at 5213 Kempton Drive, approximately 600, 700 feet from where this proposal is going to be. I moved to Windsor with my wife in July. We lived in the metro area where this stuff goes on time and time again, and it causes problems in these high-density units. I've been a police officer for 21 years, so I know about crime. I've served in the Air Force for 26 years, so I know about public service. Everything right here, it's going to bring more calls for service. He even admitted that we have a problem with the high-density housing in Windsor. So your stats are going to be skewed. Of course, most of your calls for service for police agencies are going to be single-family housing, because that's what we're here. That's where everybody lives. They live in single-family housing in this area. So when we see an article in the Windsor Now that Windsor is the 3rd safest community in Colorado, do we want that to change? I want it to change for the better. But when you bring multifamily housing like this, it brings domestic violence, it brings drugs, it brings a whole bunch of other problems. It brings everybody's cars being broken into. I deal with this day in and day out, 40 hours a week. 900 cars are going to be there. Well, I've seen these developments go up in the metro area where I work, and it's not going to be minor impact on traffic. Traffic accidents are going to increase. Steeplechase is already a raceway. Now you're just adding more and more cars to Steeplechase Drive. Same thing with all the other thoroughfares in there. It's going to be a raceway. We don't have crime in our neighborhood, and that's why I moved there. Paid $650,000 for a house so I could live in a nice, respectful neighborhood. I don't want what I had in my last house, where I had people breaking into my cars. That at one time was a nice neighborhood, but because of townhouses and because of high-density units, it brought in the problems. I responded to those problems. So please take that into consideration. I appreciate them moving it further west, but it's still going to have a huge, huge impact. I'll be honest, I'd rather deal with the industrial traffic during the day, because those people will honestly drive a little bit better than what we're going to see over there. And the crime rate isn't going to increase like it's going to increase when we have this happen. So, thank you.
Hi, my name's Chris Payne. I'm at 7039 Aladar Drive. I agree with everything he just said, so I'm not going to repeat anything he said, but a couple things I want to bring up to go along with that is if we end up with multi-level housing like this in there, and the level that we're being presented with, if I'm understanding correctly, this builder is Journey Homes. Anyone sitting in this room right now can pull out their phone and just Google Journey Homes and look at the ratings of this building company. It is not anything we want building a house anywhere in Windsor. Maybe they already do, I don't know. Obviously, if we have a lower end apartment complex come in here, that's gonna bring in even a lower end of people in that to make it affordable, or that what the rent is gonna actually be. So, you know, I think one of the points that was brought up in one of the slides by the gentleman on the end down there was kind of the vision of Windsor and what the plans are, and having everything kind of mesh with the surrounding area. And to me, it makes no sense that you're gonna take and put a lower end apartment complex right next to 650 to 100 or to $1 million houses. You know, if you're gonna put an apartment complex or some multi-level family in there, let's make it on the high end bare minimum. Let's make it maximum 2 stories. If you look on Ziegler in Fort Collins and go down there are some multi-level housing in there. I lived in them. And I'm gonna tell you, these were not cheap properties. These were $400,000 townhouses I lived in. And there was crime right there every day. Exactly what the policeman said is when you bring those people in and start piling them on top of each other, it changes the dynamics of who you get and what goes on around there. So I don't know if it's the vision to have multi-level family, but if we are gonna do that, by golly, let's put it on the spectrum of making sense what matches our area of town and have it at least match the neighborhoods around it versus coming in there and bringing in something on the lowest end, which is what Journey Homes is. That's about as entry level as you can get. So that's all I've got.
Hi, I'm Amber Oxley. I live at 4609 Pompano Drive, and you can see my house in the little picture that he had with the map. I back right up to that lot. And I agree with what they say. I'm opposed to it. And also when they mention those younger families and the young professionals and starting families, I think I am that. And my husband and I lived in a townhouse, and his car was broken into about once a month. And we moved away so that we could start a family, and we put a lot of our budget to our home, and I'd like to keep that value up. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Richard Leffler. I live at 7025 Aladar Drive. A lot of information was thrown up on the screen tonight. A little hard to digest all of it as quickly as it was presented. One stat that I would like to point out, just sort of as an example, were that the number of school students generated by apartments was less than the number of school students generated by single-family homes. Obviously,
I'm sorry, can you repeat the number of what?
the number of school students that come out of apartments versus single families was lower, and theoretically giving comfort to the idea that we wouldn't be overburdening our schools. What wasn't presented in that stat is that the number of apartment units on that the specific acreage that's being developed is far more concentrated than the number of units would be if it were single-family homes as opposed. The other thing I'd like to point out is when my wife and I invested into our home here in Windsor, one of the elements we considered was the land use plan of record at that time. Changing that is just changes the dynamics of the town, and I just would like the board to consider that when they're making their decision here tonight. Thank you.
My name is Vicki Reinke, and I live at 5203 Hialeah Drive. Good evening. When we first decided to build a home 6 years ago, we were looking at a lot in a nearby city, and what we encountered at the planning board was enough to make us search elsewhere. When we began working with Windsor, however, we knew we were home. From the beginning, we were impressed with the knowledgeable, courteous, helpful, common sense approach. We knew growth would follow us, but we were confident that with the light industrial zoning around us, that common sense would continue to prevail. The zoning change not only feels like a bait and switch, but we also wonder what happened to common sense. This development will overburden the arterials, as the major roads will be consumed by retail development traffic. Windsor's downtown is full of promise. Why send people to spend their dollars away from there to other communities? We were assured at the planning meeting that they would be heading west to I-25, not east on our neighborhood roads. That's where that's coming from. Also, we have yet to hear from the Loveland School District how they will handle the potential hundreds of students this development and the ones being built to the west will add. If our kids have to be once again bused into inner city Loveland, which is a long way away, our resale values will be affected. They show those on Zillow. When I told a friend that grew up in Windsor where we were building, she laughed. She informed me that native Windsorites don't consider our area Windsor. We beg to differ. We want to be part of the community, valued, contributing members, not easily ignored stepchildren. Let's work together utilizing the common sense approach to find a better solution. At the very least, please keep MF1. One man's dreams of grandeur should not supersede hundreds of others' quality of life. Thank you for your consideration.
Anyone else?
Mayor, board members, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Ron Steinbach. I live at 7008 Ruidoso Drive in the Highland Ridge subdivision, and I am here in support of the rezoning project. You've heard some, and you'll probably hear more, complaints from my neighbors about this proposal. Our primary concerns seem to fall into 4 categories: damage and abuse or overuse of the Coyote Gulch Park and the Belmont Ridge open space, both of which are town open access areas. Increased crime, increased traffic, and the concept that renters are somehow more irresponsible than homeowners. It's clear to me from the discussions at the Planning Commission that these concerns were either addressed by the developer or they just don't have merit. While some neighbors credit themselves with blocking this proposal in April, it's important to keep in mind that even though they did influence the outcome, the reason the Planning Commission rejected the initial proposal was because they said the developer didn't provide enough data and facts for them to make an informed decision. Well, I think the developer rectified that with this current proposal. But I don't want to focus on the opponents anymore. I want to focus on what I consider the positive side of this project and the benefits that it will bring. All the opponents you've heard so far tonight have had stories. Well, I have one too. My son and daughter-in-law live in Loveland. They're both veterans committed to community service. She's a licensed social worker dealing with mental health. My son is a firefighter. When they moved to this area 5 years ago, and then again recently when they looked for a home, Windsor had nothing to offer. They had 2 criteria: affordability to fit their budget and reasonable access to I-25. There is simply no reasonably priced housing west of County Road 13. It's just not there. They were basically frozen out of the Windsor housing market as a result of the fact that there was nothing there for them. Windsor needs young people, young community-minded people like my son and his wife. They'll be the future of the town. And one of the best ways to encourage and recruit people like that is to establish reasonably priced housing in southwest Windsor. The neighbors' complaints just don't stack up to that drastic need that the town has for this housing. Martin Lynn's proposal is the right project in the right location. Thank you.
My name is Pat Davey. I live at 8795 Longs Peak Circle. I would like to go on record that I oppose this rezoning. I bought my house in Steeplechase in 2008. And before we did that, we checked around us for what kind of zoning we had in those empty lots to the west of us. And guess what? It was light industrial. And I looked around what light industrial was there, and I saw Pinkies, and I saw those other warehouses there, and the tire shops and places like that. And I thought, those aren't bad neighbors. There's not that much coming and going there. But best of all, at night they go home and they stay home. When you build apartment buildings, they come home and they don't stay home because there's a lot more people there at night. And at the Planning Commission meeting, Martin Lynn told us that he bought this property as a foreclosure during the downturn, during the recession. And guess what? It was zoned light industrial then. So he bought it the same time I pretty much bought it, and we both agreed on the zoning of it. That's when you buy something, you agree to that, the zoning right then. And now he's changing it, okay? And I don't agree with just zoning changes just to make a buck, okay? And now we'll go on to the comprehensive plan, because we hear this comprehensive plan of 2015. Well, that had to be put together in 13 and 14, and that time there were hardly any permits for multifamily houses. But since then, there's been a lot, and you need to update your 2014 plan because of the strict high growth that Windsor's had. Those plans don't make any sense, and the consultants shouldn't be able to use those for ammunition to make a subdivision or a apartment complex be justified. Because this year there were 245 units that were permitted for rentals. 245 rentals. 200 of them were Martins up on Pelican Bluffs. That's not including any of them that are going to be in Rain Dance. And Rain Dance is going to have well over 1,000, I'm sure. Don't know, couldn't get the data. But already permitted, the lots that are permitted, there's 400 undeveloped lots right now. That's not units, that's lots that have multifamily on them. So I would guess that there's close to 1,600 units of multifamily that are already permitted, ready to go. And now Martin Lynn is asking you to change rezoning so that he can build more apartment buildings. What about the people that already have those? What about people that already have their permits waiting? That's not fair to them. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rex Smithgall. I live at 5216 Mountaineer Drive, just east of this proposal. And I was listening to Mr. Lynn's presentation, and I do appreciate the movement of the project further to the west. But Mr. Lynn mentioned that he didn't agree, necessarily that should be light industrial. So, number one,
will you please address us and speak into the
Oh, I'm sorry.
microphone,
Okay.
because for the folks at home, it doesn't capture you.
Okay. So, number one, is it Mr. Lynn's intention to pursue multifamily with that tract of land in the future? And if not, would he commit for the record to not bring it back for multi-residential in the future? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Colin Sanders, 7035 Ruidoso Drive in Windsor. I'm not going to rehash what everyone has already said. I am opposed to this, and for many of those reasons. One of my biggest concerns, and this is right out of the ordinances of the City of Windsor, Section 16.6-60. And this piece here itself talks about when a variance is granted. And variances are granted by hardship. I heard there was an application process. What was the hardship? It also says in here that, forgive me while that this will not change the character of the neighborhood in a rezoning variance. This rezoning will change the character of the neighborhood. It is not a hardship. And it goes on to say in this ordinance that regardless of financial issues, it won't be granted if these other conditions aren't met. I asked a question at the meeting for the planning meeting. And Mr. Lynn stated that, yes, this project was going to be 18.8 people as opposed to the MF2 top end of 39. The question was, why can't we sharpen the pencil a little bit and get this MF1? If we're not that far away, let's get an MF1. A couple weeks ago, we were all here to talk about this issue then, and for some reason, and his representative stated, well, there's something else going on with the property. We don't know if this project's going to go forward. We may have something else going on. If you zone this MF2 and they have something else going on, there's nothing to stop them from putting 39 people per acre instead of the 18. It could be a bait and switch. I agree. It's going to develop. This is the wrong type of development for this area. Thank you.
Mike Gunderson, 4611 Freehold Drive, Windsor. Ladies, gentlemen, I want to kind of compliment you folks for what you've done in the past. You created what I call an ownership model. Fort Collins doesn't have it. Loveland doesn't have it. Johnstown doesn't have it. Timoth has it. What I'm talking about is single-family home ownership. I hate to see you get seduced by the multifamily rental non-ownership. And by the way, there is a difference between renters and owners. Think about it. When you go to the airport and you rent a car, do you take care of it the same way you take care of your own car? I'll answer it for you. No, you don't. Now, I want to shift for a minute because there was a traffic study that was presented at the Planning Commission. It stated the traffic is going to go west and south. If the traffic is going to go west and south, and there's any validity to that traffic study, then what's the need for exits and entrances and expansion of Steeplechase West? I'd say that that traffic study means nothing if that's what you're going to do. Why spend money on extending that when the traffic's going to go west and south? As far as crime, my daughter worked for the Longmont Police Department. The greater majority of their calls were from high-density rental apartments. Think about that. That's what we're putting over there, next to a wonderful neighborhood. Our quality of life will go down. Now, another question. I suspect that there's nobody on this council that wants to live next to that project. And I suspect Mr. Lynn, if a project such as that was proposed for his neighborhood, he'd be the first person to object. What I think you should do is reject this rezoning. Reject it, reject it, reject it. Send it back, make them come up with something that is way less ambitious, way less dense, keep the crime rate down, don't destroy our home ownership, don't destroy our quality of life. Remember, we elected you folks to represent us and to protect us. And part of protecting us is helping us maintain our quality of life. This will not. This will change the character of these neighborhoods. Thank you.
Hi. Thanks for having us here tonight. My name is Kevin Poole. I live on 8750 Longs Peak Circle. And I'll be brief because a lot of the comments that have come out tonight were exactly what I would say. I'm opposed to this rezoning. We've invested a lot of money in buying a property in Steeplechase. And, you know, as terrible as it might sound, I choose not to live next door to apartments. And there is a difference between ownership versus rental. The old phrase, drive it like you stole it. You don't go out and buy a brand new car and make that same statement when you drive it away from the dealership. There's a distinct difference. And a comment that the mayor made in your opening statement, I sincerely respect that. You said your decision should be based on facts. I have a hard time with the developer's presentation when he used the statistics for the crime rate as the apartments being only 8%, when there's not that many apartments to begin with. That skews the facts of what those crime rates will be in an area of high density such as the apartments. And because of blurring those details into what's supposed to be a factual report, I choose to dismiss the majority of what he said. And I mean no disrespect to him, but I think it was disingenuous to include it in that report. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Candy Joshi, 5451 Farview Court. I wanted to bring up a couple things. I live in Steeplechase. It's an equestrian community, and already people are zooming through our road, and we can't put any speed bumps or anything in there, and I just feel like high density will increase the amount of traffic we have. Another thing, I volunteer in the schools like full-time. High Plains is our school. We have 475 kids plus almost 60 preschoolers, and the capacity is 550. Already they're planning apartments they're trying to put apartments across the school in Loveland. All of Centerra is growing. There's multi-family planning north on Highland Meadows Parkway, and there's also apartments planned for the west side of the freeway in the Brands. So there's already a lot of housing going in, and it's a big concern to us because who knows what the school district will have to do to solve the problem. It affects our home values. Thanks.
My name is Dale Gaither, 5285 Black Hawk Drive in the Steeplechase community. And I'm against the rezoning. And looking at the presentation, there's a lot of really neat things that were brought up that I think that some of us, myself especially, could be interested in, but the housing and the high density I'm not. And that's my main reason that I'm here. I actually work in Denver, and I choose to drive out here. I've got 2 little boys and married, so wanted a safe area to raise the family. High density's not it. I work in Denver. If I wanted that, I would live there. The schools, Candy addressed that. As soon as the first brick was set at High Plains, it was already over capacity, so that's going to have to be addressed. But I keep hearing the one thing about diversity in regards to financial diversity. You know, at one point, I moved 7 times in 10 years. And in that, sometimes I could live in the nicest areas, sometimes I couldn't. Most of the times I couldn't. Sometimes they were apartments, and sometimes they were a home. But I did what I could, and I went to the best area that I could. Windsor is a wonderful area. It's an area that people drive by and say, wow, that's nice. Maybe I can't afford that right now. Windsor has enjoyed real estate prices jumping dramatically, one of the highest in Colorado, and I think that's a good thing. And I think one of the reasons that is because safe, single-family homes, it's a family environment. I guarantee you the reason Windsor is what it is not because of high density. Thank you very much.
My name is Kim Davey, and I live at 8795 Longs Peak Circle in Steeplechase. I am opposed to the rezoning of the parcel in question from light industrial to high-density MF2. It does not seem to be good planning to approve this request on many levels. After talking to a previous town board member and him explaining what goes on to establish the zoning, excuse me, in the first place, he said that it would be a rare decision to change from such low density to high density. That a lot of time and effort goes into these original decisions and they should not be easily changed. That it should be changed only if it is determined to be in the best interest for the existing neighborhood, which it clearly is not. There are several parcels of land in Windsor that are already zoned MF2 high density. Why are you not looking at these to build on for the apartments? In a recent article in the Windsor paper, dated October 22nd, 2017, Stacy Johnson, who's the Economic Development Director for Windsor, says that by energizing the downtown area with a combination of homes, retail, and offices, that we hope to generate more activity downtown. She further states that we really are excited about getting more business professionals living downtown. As Mr. Talon of the Planning Commission said at a previous meeting, we should be building from the inside of town out. There are many other options to build the much-needed apartments in Windsor. So I ask you, as a board of elected officials, elected by us to be our voice, to put your personal opinions aside and to vote no on this proposal. Do what you were elected to do. Be the voice for the majority and not the select few who are in this for their own financial gain. Thank you.
Good evening, Board. My name is John Mariswa. I live at 7028 Elladar Drive in Highlands Ridge. I want to go on record to say that I'm opposed to this rezoning, maybe for a reason that hasn't been brought up yet. I'm a little confused. Just a little while back, a gentleman that was pro proposal stated that we needed affordable housing for people. But yet, during Mr. Lynn's presentation, he was trying to sell it as a upscale, high-end. And I'm a little confused by that. And that's why I urge you to reject this proposal until something like a question like that is answered. What is it? Is it upscale or is it entry level or affordable, however you want to put it? I think that's an important question that needs to be answered before we proceed. And the other thought I had listening to all the comments today is I'm a little confused on the crime study that Mr. Lynn proposed from October 16, October 17, used statistics from Weld County for a project that's going in Larimer County. I'm not sure I can trust those statistics that were brought forward. Thank you.
My name's Gary LeMay at 5514 Fairmount. When this was proposed to us earlier by Mr. Lind, I think, he said that there is a traffic light at Crossroads and Highland Meadows, I think, where traffic from these units would go to, get to west and south. If you want them to come to Windsor, they're not going to go there. They're going to go right down Steeplechase and New Liberty, which are one lane in each direction. Steeplechase doesn't even have, for the most part, a bike lane. So you're going to be faced with putting in a bigger street there. So anyway, and I'm opposed to this for all the reasons that have been brought up. Thank you.
Is there any other?
My name is Pat Hollinger, and I live at 7002 Ruidoso Drive. And I'd like to address the school issue. When High Plains was developed, they were assuming there would be, it was built for 550 students. According to the Thompson School District Master Plan, even before it was built, there were 1,200 students who needed a school in that area. This is before we would build a high-density apartment area. As a school psychologist, I have worked in high-density areas, and I have seen negative impact of overcrowded schools. There is classroom management issues. The teachers are overworked and overwhelmed. The student achievement suffers because they don't get as much individual attention as is needed. They compensate by using paras or teacher associates who have no training in education, so it's not the same as getting direct teacher instruction. So, as I mentioned, student achievement suffers. So are we going to mortgage our children's futures for someone's financial gain? That's my question to you. Thank you.
And then, is there anybody else, because we've been at about an hour of public comment, so I want you all to have an opportunity to speak, so we'll go there, and then I see 3 others, and then we're going to close it so the town board members can ask their questions.
Good evening. My name is Kurt Reinke, 5203 Hialeah Drive. I just want to go on record as opposed to this. I agree with most of the comments that have been said tonight. I just believe that the leap in that zoning from very low density to really high density is just wrong. It's too big of a leap. Thank you.
I am Antonio Gucci. I live on 7404 Thistledown. Most of the people here, or all of them, don't want apartments. That's why I came. I'm opposed to it. There's people downstairs that are opposed to it. Who wants apartments? Raise their hands. That's it. Nobody wants apartments.
Good evening. I'm Mike Kimmick, 7044 Ruidoso Drive. Thank you, Mr. Lind, for at least making an effort to do improvements to this. I do appreciate you putting that effort in, but I still oppose this as it is presented tonight for all the reasons that have been stated tonight, but also from personal experience. 25 years ago, I moved into a town about the same size as Windsor. I moved out of there 5 years ago when it had grown to over 50,000, had gridlock Monday through Sunday, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day because of the same type of situation. Lots of multifamily, high-density apartments put in, and it just created chaos. I don't want to see that happen in Windsor. While I do agree with the comment that mixed use can improve home values, multi-density does not unless you're putting in something like a Park Avenue. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Doug Brobst, 7035 Aladar Drive. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Sorry, I'm kind of hoarse, but felt it was important to come tonight. I assume all of you have access to the minutes of the planning board meeting back in October. Hopefully, if you have read through them, you read through clear to the end, where the head of the board made a statement, and I'll just paraphrase it, that Mr. Lind has done a lot of good things for the town of Windsor. Therefore, he believes that we should go ahead and have faith in Mr. Lind to do the right thing as far as an apartment complex like this is concerned. That statement, when he said it, really concerned me. I think I'm not going to try to dispute whether what Mr. Lind has done around Windsor in the past has been good or bad. All of it's been good or bad for Windsor. But I think as a board, you need to scrutinize a project that he proposes to make sure that it's going to be good for the town of Windsor and not just for Mr. Lynn's bottom line. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Mr. Lynn has said several times that this is going to be a high-end type of development. I really think that he's confusing high-end with high density. And I think it would be good for Mr. Lynn to tell us just what kind of price range these apartments, what they're going to rent for, to see just how they compare to what you could be able to buy a house for. Earlier this evening, there was a speaker who spoke in support of this proposal, and he was talking about his family looking for a place to live here in Windsor and ended up in Loveland. My wife and I have kind of the opposite situation as that. We were looking at property in Loveland, and we're quite surprised how what we could get for our money in Loveland. But then we heard about how the reputation of Loveland is bad, not supporting their schools as well as what Fort Collins and Windsor does. And so I would just ask that you consider that let's not lower Windsor's reputation and the standards that Windsor has in order to try to compete with towns such as Loveland. Let's keep Windsor's reputation where it's at and the standards that we have here in Windsor. Thank you.
Did you have something? I'll let you be the last one, unless there is somebody else who wants, okay. That and then you. Okay, go ahead.
My name is Christopher Fair. I'm from 7038 Aladar Drive. I just, I looked at the stats that Mr. Lynn had on the board. It said 8% were coming from apartments, but we have 86. Was it 86%? That's what I remember. So let's say 20%. That's 40% of the crime. You understand that that's the effect. It's 40% more than it should be. So I'm looking at it. It's at least 8% higher than it ought to be. You got 32 versus that. You got to scale it for size. That's one thing. And the second is, we've got phones. We can look this up. Holy cow, this stuff's everywhere. It says Thomas Stuckey and John Ottersmith show that rates of murder, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault are all generally higher in areas with high-density residential developments and commercial property, and generally lower in areas characterized by industry, parks, and schools. That's why we're concerned. If there were 200 of us coming to you and saying we just bought a car at a dealership, okay, and we all told you that we bought 2017 BMWs, and the next day they were all 2010 Fords, what would you do? Okay? You would take that guy out and hang him almost. That would be just highway robbery. That's what's happening to us. With our single highest investment, we are having our homes converted into something that's worth much less than what we anticipated them to be worth based on the present land use when we purchased our homes. 3 years ago, I made the decision to buy my home based on the land use. I understand that you guys can change it, but you've always been good about changing things in a gradual manner, in a slight manner, not in the extreme manner that this is representing. If it's really not that far from stage one, I don't remember MR, is it MF, whatever, I don't care, MF2 housing to MF1 housing, then take it down to MF1 housing. The fact is, high density just is no good for us, it's no good for Windsor, and it's not the right thing to do for your constituency. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Hi, I'm Emily Gunderson. I live at 4611 Freehold Drive, and I'm opposed to the rezoning for all the reasons that have already been stated. I'd also like to say I've been a police officer in the city of Longmont, and I have worked in beats where there is at least 3 major multifamily housing, and they took up the majority of our calls. Even if you account for the number of people in those units, our call load was still higher in those across the board, and you can go and look the stats up. I'm very concerned by what I saw Mr. Lind throw up on the board. I don't think that's representative of what the crime rates would be if you pack that many people into that small of an area. You also have more transitional people that are just coming and going, so your chances of getting a bad apple are much higher. I've also lived in a condo for 14 years, and 3 large apartment complexes moved into my area within about a mile or 2 of me. And I can tell you the tenor of that neighborhood changed completely. I had my mountain bike stolen out of my garage. I had neighbors above me that were drunk consistently, saying they were going to kill themselves. My own calls to the police department increased. So I do wonder how long it's been since Mr. Lynn actually lived in a condo or right across the street from apartments, because these aren't stories, this is the truth. Our crime will go up, our traffic will go up, the noise will go up. I think this is the wrong thing, especially next to a neighborhood with $1 million to, $500,000 to $1 million homes. It's just not right for that area. The traffic study that he produced earlier, from what I could see, because most of his studies were just flashed on the screen and we didn't have time to actually read them, but at the planning meeting, he stated that most of the traffic was going to go south and west to I-25 because young professionals from Denver were going to be moving into those apartments. Well, one, if I were a young professional and I was working in Denver, I wouldn't move all the way up to Windsor because Windsor doesn't have what I would want. We don't have the huge restaurants, the nightlife that Denver has. If I were a young professional in Fort Collins or Loveland, yes, I would probably move to those apartments. But I just don't understand how he's getting his facts and his figures, and I do question the validity of these studies that he's presented to you, and I hope you look at them very carefully and look at who's producing those studies, because it's just not adding up for me. And also just one other thing, if a lot of the traffic's going south and west, I don't know how that's going to happen since our grocery stores are on Main Street, so people are going to be going up Steeplechase, or they're going to be going up Fairgrounds or Highland Meadows over to 392 to get their groceries. I just don't see that even being plausible. And if everyone's going south and west to I-25, then no one's going to downtown Windsor, and I think that's something you need to look at if you want to reinvigorate that area. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, are there any questions from the town board members for Mr. Hornbeck or the applicant who made presentation this evening? Okay, Mr. Redmeyer.
I had one. This is for the applicant. If Mr. Lynn could answer this. In his presentation, he made the slight reference to the way it's zoned right now, and I don't know if you can go back to that. I don't want to. Can you go back to the map of how it's zoned? Maybe this is in Mr. Hornbeck's presentation. I wanted to see how it was zoned right now. I guess.
There we go.
Everything
Everything colored on that is light industrial right now.
Yeah. What I wanted to know is whether or not, I mean, the way it's zoned right now, what would be the height of it's considered to be what? General, yeah, there we go. That was Mr. Hornbeck's.
Industrial. The current zoning.
And maybe this is a question for Mr. Hornbeck. What is the current allowable height of structures within the zoning right now, right adjacent to Steeplechase Drive and Highland Meadows Parkway? What does that allow for right now? What's shaded in pink there? What does that allow for right now?
The limited industrial allows up to 75 feet. There are additional restrictions adjacent to Highland Meadows Parkway, but those wouldn't apply within the proposed rezone.
So somebody, a business could build a 75-foot high structure, a 7-story building basically, right on the other side right there. Is that within a certain proximity of Highland Meadows Parkway? I'm just trying to, I know Mr. Lind's proposal is to move this west. I'm just trying to envision that, right there versus what's proposed by Mr. Lind with the rezone and what his new development plan would be.
It's the way it's worded, the block adjacent to Highland Meadows Parkway. So it's essentially to this boundary is restricted to 35 feet. Everything west would be the 75.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Bennett.
Right, for the applicant. What do you anticipate the price point being on these apartments?
That was one of the questions I was going to address. Yeah, the rental market in this area
basically, I'm going to use Timnath to Johnstown because those are the most active areas, is encroaching on $2 a square foot for multifamily. This Spanos project down in by the Shields area is studied to be at 185. So about $2 a foot. And there was a question about the quality of these apartments and what is high end and what is entry level. And I think it's pretty clear that if you're providing a $1 million plus clubhouse and all those amenities, you're going to try to attract someone that wants to enjoy those amenities and quite frankly can afford those amenities. That said, this is that opportunity area. This is what the comprehensive plan was talking about when they were talking about opportunity. There was a comment made about one man's dream, and I want to address that because this isn't my dream. And I think I take a lot of pride in the fact that this utopia that we live in Windsor, that I enjoy myself and my grandchildren go to school here, is I think I can take a lot of pride in saying that our companies and our staff and the people that we collaborated with have raised that bar in Windsor. And we're not a switch and bait company, but that's not what we're about tonight. We're talking about what is the right thing to do for the town of Windsor. And it isn't one man's dream. This isn't my dream. I have the total enjoyment of standing in front of you tonight and being part of this deal. But the comprehensive plan was a long, long process. And it was the vision of what does Windsor want to be and what do you want to be when you grow up? Because we're not 5,000 people when I went to school. The city of Loveland was 20,000 people, the exact same size as Windsor is today. When I was born, 1961. There was no Martin Lynn, there was no Water Valley. Northern Colorado is pressured. We're pressured heavily from growth. Big article today about what the growth needs are for Northern Colorado. Larimer County needs to build 2,500 units a year. Weld County needs to build 2,500 units. It's growth. People are coming to Northern Colorado. So this property will develop. If it develops as this plat is right here, light industrial, it won't matter. They're going to go somewhere else. They're going to go to Timnath, or they're going to go just across Crossroads to the south, all the vacant fields. Centerra has 3,000 units planned down south. They're going to go. School districts are going to be pressured. Take a lot of pride in Windsor. We are very active with our school district. We stay involved. We're ahead of the curve on the bonding. But Northern Colorado has giant pressure for growth. We're doing regional traffic. We're doing all these studies. The traffic study that we did, I can bring it back up again, but it is accurate. And one thing that I think is a little bit I won't be long if I can find it. Brian. There we go. That's fine. Here's the traffic study, and here's the one that the comments were on about it going south and it going west. The distribution of the traffic actually is studied to be 8% of the trips are going actually east on Steeplechase. The reason being is because you're looking at this project in a vacuum, because it isn't just this project that we're working on in Windsor. We're working on the whole region, and we are going to provide a place for them to go. And currently, yes, it is 5 miles to King Soopers down in Windsor, but we're hoping, because of the rezoning and the plans on this project here, that there'll be a King Soopers or the like in this vicinity. Many people are going to Costco to go shopping right now. They're not going through Windsor to go Costco, they're going west. So it is a commuter area. They're heading to the interstate. Every city along the Front Range is embracing that. But the plan that's in front of you tonight is a request for a rezone based on following the comprehensive plan that was set into place in 2015. And the property will develop. If it develops out as industrial, it's going to have a different impact to the quality of life in a different way. $2 a square foot rentals are not low entry, low level rentals. And the market itself is what's dictating this. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword when you move to Windsor, because it's utopia, because that's what we've created. It's awesome, but it's also, Windsor's got to accommodate the reality of we have pressure to grow. We're going to grow. And the statistic, there was some words about the statistics on the police. It is correct that this was purely done in a vacuum because that's all the stats we have. But with the multifamily percentage to single family, it's about on track for that. Even though we have these multifamily applications in front of you, you know what the single family applications are in front of you. They're far outnumbering that. So we're staying on a trajectory of a very heavy single family based development in Windsor. So we're kind of trapped too. We're stuck. We're stuck between Loveland, Fort Collins, Timnath, Severance, Greeley, and Johnstown. We don't have an opportunity to suburbia out all the way to Briggsdale, so we have to do the very best job we can do with what we know we have. And we believe, and I believe our company stand for good, solid planning, good growth approaches. There was a question about what to do with the rest of that land. We can't address that tonight. That's not part of your decision-making process, and we can't propose anything there. My opinion, for the record, is it's not good to put light industrial next to residential. It's never good planning. But that's not for tonight.
I'm still focused on the price points.
Okay.
Approximately, you may not know this yet, but approximately how much square footage would it be per unit?
There'll be 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, so there's a mixed use of them. And then I'm sure they'll be from 600 square feet up to 1,400 square feet, very typical of product you'd see.
So we're looking at 1,200 to possibly, what'd you say?
600 to 1,400.
1,400 square feet. So it could be 2,800 monthly rent.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to see rents of in excess of $2,000 for a big unit in here. Not at all.
Okay.
It's very typical what you're seeing along the Front Range.
Any additional questions?
I do have more questions.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is probably for staff, maybe for our police chief. Regarding police calls, I'll use an example, Windsor Meadows, which is our...
I'm sorry, Mr.
Windsor Meadows. Do we have a higher incident of calls to Windsor Meadows as we would to any other housing?
No, we don't. I mean, it's cyclical.
And that's not high density, that's,
No.
that is affordable housing that we sponsor, okay. What
Yeah.
about other apartments in the community?
I would say off the top, what you're looking at is Windsor's been the beneficiary of having a very stable community for a long time, and the economics of the area have really dictated a clientele that is really pretty stable across the board. The impact in my 32 plus years in Windsor really demonstrates that there is no one area in the community that is hit adversely than any other. Are there areas in other communities? Yes, I would say so. That's one of the reasons I stayed here with my family and lived here, is because Windsor is a different breed. It is a different animal as far as the complexities of what takes place. Depending on the economics, that could change everything, and there's no telling what will happen in the future. I can tell you right now that the majority of our calls, repeat calls, are to single-family homes.
Trying to think how to ask this question. This is for any staff or our chief. Is there a difference between high density and the high density apartment and the income level? I don't know if I asked that correctly. If you have low income, high density versus higher income, high density, is there a difference in crime rates?
I imagine there could be, but I wouldn't attribute that to Windsor. I mean,
Okay.
no, I would say that what we have here is pretty much across the board.
Okay.
It used to be in the old days, you'd have apartment complexes with
run their bad apples out, and they would go to the other apartment complex and vice versa. I would say the last 15 to 20 years, we've actually seen a stabling of that market out, where if there's somebody that is not a viable tenant, they can't find a place to rent in Windsor.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Anybody else?
Madam Mayor,
Mr.
is
Anderson.
this only for questions?
This is only for questions. If not, I have just a couple questions. I don't know if this is for the applicant, but we've heard concerning MF2 versus MF1. What assurances do we have, or can we have, if the applicant moves forward with the MF2 at the 18.8, that it would stay there versus ratcheting up to the higher number?
One of the questions at the first planning commission last April was, okay, you're showing us a site plan, but it's not specific, it's not lot specific, it's not product specific. So we pulled it back off, retooled the entire deal and did all of those, and Mr. McCarter asked me tonight if this application was for the record and what I was submitting was for the record. And my answer was yes, because they've actually gone back and they've taken the time to draw the project, civil engineer the project, and site plan the project. So what we're proposing tonight is site specific to the units, to the quantity of units, the density, the location of the clubhouse, parking lots, etc. So the project that's in front of you will be back in front for the site plan, and it will be that product.
Okay.
And that density.
Mr. McCarter, does that suffice as an assurance that we would not see a higher density than what has been presented this evening?
Well, the site planning doesn't drive the zoning. I will say that. The pending site plan application may contain a product which, if approved, will give you the assurance that you're talking about. But I can't say that an approved site plan is permanent if it doesn't get built. So if it isn't built and then the market changes or demand changes or circumstances change, the MF2 zoning allows up to a certain maximum density that is not necessarily driven by a site plan that's approved in 2018. So I agree with Mr. Lind that what they have pending downstairs right now is not as dense as MF2 would allow, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that will be built even if it's approved. I don't know how else to say it. I appreciate the representation he's making, but that doesn't mean that what's on these slides will be built. It just means that's what is in progress, or in process downstairs.
So obviously this is quasi-judicial and for the record could be used at any time. So for the record, I would say the product that's in front of you is what's going to be on there. Therefore, it would be a pretty heavy burden for anybody that would retake this project and come back through planning commission or come back to you at a future time to get a final approval for a site plan that did not honor what's represented tonight in these chambers. So I suppose, I'm not a lawyer, but the multifamily 2 zoning does allow much higher, but the project that we're proposing on this, that will be before you, is this project that's in front of you.
So Mr. Hornbeck, for the record, is this proposal that the applicant has brought before us, it does meet compliance with the rezoning per the comp plan to date?
It does, yes.
Okay. Okay, seeing no further questions?
And I just want to
Mr.
pause for a
McCarter?
second and make certain that all questions of the applicant, of the public, of staff are resolved during the public hearing, because once you close the public hearing, the evidence is closed. And you can't, I won't permit further inquiry into facts unless you reopen the public hearing, because that's a matter of fairness to everyone in this room.
Right. Has that all been satisfied? Okay, somebody's raised their hand out there. Would we allow, even though they spoke before? Is it a new question or a new? Yes.
So my concern, again, Chris Payne, 7039 Aladar. My concern is exactly what's being brought up, but it's going around in a couple different directions. If this is zoned as MF2 and this project doesn't take place, that property is now zoned MF2. So down the road, anyone who brings a project, once Mr. Lynn sells that land to a new developer, it's MF2. So why, if I'm buying a property from Mr. Lind and he didn't develop these that he's proposed, and now I'm coming in there and buying an MF2, am I going to come up in front of Windsor's board and say, hey, I bought an MF2 that gives me up to X amount of people per unit or X amount of capacity? How is that going to lay out? And so it can't be blurry. It's either 18 or lower or 18 or higher as far as I'm concerned. You can't propose it as an MF2, but we're going to build it as an MF1. That's baloney. So that's my 2 cents. But I just want to clarify that that is in fact correct with Mr. McCarter. I don't know if I'm asking the question properly to get an answer, but is my thought process correct? Once it's an MF2, it's an MF2?
I've rendered an opinion to my client about this. I don't know that I'm necessarily going to render one for you.
I want to make sure I'm clear of what I'm hearing. So.
Okay.
My name is Pat Davey. I live at 8795 Longs Peak Circle. I'm confused what's happening here because we were talking about rezoning and now we're kind of talking about a site plan. And I think there's a lot of comments that would come to Mr. Lind about a site plan. Because when we first presented and he presented at the Planning Commission, it was ordinance to vote for the rezoning, and then there was also an ordinance for the site plan. And I don't see that on the agenda tonight about a site plan. So I think that has to go through the process because there's a lot of comments about how the road goes through that complex, I think.
Go ahead.
Madam Mayor, if I can address that comment. The site plan was on the Planning Commission agenda. Per usual procedure, it was a preliminary site plan. The Planning Commission takes action on that. If it's approved, they're then able to submit final, which would come before Planning Commission and then Town Board. So that's why it's not before you at this time as a formal action item.
You need my name again?
Yes, we do. Sorry.
Colin Sanders, 7035 Ruidoso. Once you approve MF2, it's MF2, and Mr. Lind has made it painfully clear to us in the past that there are certain rights that the owner of a property has based on the zoning. I'm using his own words. If this project doesn't go through, and he does sell it, the new owner has certain rights. He also alluded to, and a question was asked, what about the other property that is right by it? Oh, well, we're not talking about that property tonight. That's down the road. Sounds to me like there's plans. Once this is zoned, once this is changed to MF2, it opens up a whole can of worms for the property surrounding it. Thank you.
Kelly Boyle, 7402 Ladbroke Drive. I'm wondering if there's been an environmental impact statement done on the rezoned proposal. We've seen quite a few bald eagles and owls in our neighborhoods recently, and I'm wondering what the impact would be compared to light commercial and adding 1,000 people or more and a lot of higher general commercial into that area, if there's been any environmental impact statement done or study done.
Mr. Lynn, did you want to address anything further with the MF2 versus MF1?
I think it's clear tonight that there's a lot of anxiety about the MF2 zoning, and the only thing that I can address on that And I know that it's a legal binding document, but not in this court. But my companies will put a deed restriction on this property because we have a PUD master plan that we're doing with the town over all of this at a later date, not on this particular property, but to the east. And it's imperative that we control what is next to our surrounding land. So it isn't for your decision tonight, but again, I stand before you with 3 decades of doing what I've said I've done. So it isn't part of your decision process, but on the other hand, that's not what our company's for. And all of the brands east is in front of you. We worked very hard on the districts, and we can't take risk of not knowing what the property's gonna be. So when we do property, we deed restrict it to what it is when we go into implementation of the development. This property will be developed on that plan. The applicant is already in with the site plan. It's in staff's hands. So there's really nothing more that we can do for assurances on that. It happened to be 0.8 over on the densities, and that's where it ended up being. There's a giant amount of open space with this project, so it's just how it fit. There's a big arroyo back in there. And so that's really it. Addressing the environmental impact that's not required on the zoning. I can tell you that environmentally, eagles, what have you, 75-foot height is a little bit, it's going to affect things differently than where we're at. But I think beyond that, I can give you no assurances. We are requesting a zoning based on the facts that we've presented in front of you.
Gary LeMay, 5514 Fairmount. You know, it's a matter of trust. If you people decide it's MF2, it's MF2. It changes it. They can do anything they want. It's a matter of trust. You're going to trust the word of somebody by, you know, making the decision to make it MF2. I mean, that's not practical, and you guys know that. So.
Any follow-up? Oh. This will be the final one.
Again, name is Mike Kimmick, 7044 Ruidoso Drive. My one concern about if we go MF2 is that opens it up for any other developer on any of the other lots to be able to say, you've already set precedent in allowing MF2. That's another concern that I think the board needs to, or the council needs to consider as well.
Any follow-up questions from the board? Okay. We have everything we need to conclude the record at this time, Mr. McCarver?
All of your questions have been exhausted, then I think you can close a public hearing if that's what you want to do.
Are all questions from board members satisfied at this time? Okay. I would seek a motion to close public hearing.
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Bennett and a second from Mr. Rennemeyer to close public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Public hearing is closed. Moving on to item 2, ordinance number 2017-1548. An ordinance rezoning Eagle Crossing subdivision, second filing, Track B, Eagle Crossing subdivision, third filing, Tracks A and Track B, and Fossil Ridge subdivision, second filing, Lot 4, Block 11. Tom Siegel, Eagle Crossing Windsor LLC applicant, John Myers, TST Incorporated, consulting engineers, applicant's representative. This is first reading and again quasi-judicial. Mr. Hornbeck?
I have nothing further to add.
Okay.
I have a couple of points I want to make before you deliberate on this. The record was conflicted. It was not uniform in any particular direction. But when serving in a quasi-judicial fashion, you're acting like a judge. That's what quasi-judicial is. You have to determine which facts you're going to give weight to, which evidence you're going to give weight to. And you've heard all kinds of evidence here tonight from varying points of view and different experience levels. But the criteria that you need to be following is was set forth in Paul's slide a moment ago as far as what the comprehensive plan calls for in terms of diverse housing in residential areas, a diversity of housing types and sizes. And you have to decide whether the evidence that's been presented satisfies you that those criteria have been met. This is not like a legislative setting where you can walk in here with your minds made up. You have to listen to the evidence and be convinced that the evidence presented tilts in this direction or doesn't. The legal standard is whether there is even a shred of reliable evidence that supports your findings when it comes to whether the criteria have been met. It doesn't have to be preponderance. It doesn't have to be beyond a reasonable doubt. It doesn't have to be overabundant or overwhelming. It just needs to be some credible, competent support in the record for you to make a finding of fact that the applicant has carried his burden of proof or he hasn't. I recognize that the evidence is in conflict. It's not uniform in all respects. It's up to you to sort through that. But I want to point out that there is a legal standard at play here. There are due process rights in play, and that your decision, regardless of what it is, has to be built based on the record presented tonight. And whether it's an approval or a denial, we'll need some findings of fact, and I'll help you through that as we near a decision on this and as you eventually take a vote on the question. That's all I've got. I've gone out of my way this evening to make that clear because I think it's obvious that people feel very strongly tonight about how this is going to turn out, both on Mr. Lynn's behalf and all of these people from the neighboring properties, and I respect that. But I also want to make certain that you zero in on the legal standard, which is there any evidence that supports a finding that the criteria have been met? And if you find that's true, the legal standard has been met. The reverse is also true. If you find that there is no evidence to support a finding that these criteria have been met, then a denial is in order. But you get to decide based on the evidence. That's all I've got.
And there's no public comment on this reading tonight because it would be accepted in the second reading?
Right, I should point that out too. This evening, a simple majority of you participating carries the question to second reading. So you don't need a supermajority as you would for final adoption. All it takes will be 3 out of the 5 of you voting one way or another. If it goes to second reading, the charter requires that you take public comment, but because this is quasi-judicial, that comment cannot be considered by you. It doesn't fit, but it is part of the charter. The only way it can matter and can be a factor for your decision on second reading is if you were to notify everyone that you were going to reopen the public hearing, give the applicant a fair shot at being heard on those questions, and of course giving people who want to speak a fair shot as well. So tonight it's a simple majority one way or the other.
And for the record, the Planning Commission did recommend approval?
That's the record that Mr. Hornbeck made.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board? Okay. Seeing none, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I would move to approve ordinance number 2017-1548 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor from Ms. Showerman and a second from Mr. Adams for approval of ordinance number 2017-1548. All in favor, vote yes.
For the record, I make that motion based off the finding of fact that I believe the presentation by both staff and the applicant has shown that this rezoning is in compliance with our comprehensive plan. The general commercial area that is going to exist there, whether a rezoning is made or not, is going to create an objective where we can have the option to have housing within that, which helps support our comprehensive plan as well as the diverse housing needs.
Okay. Anything else further before okay. Okay, all in favor vote yes. Opposed, no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on, you have a few minutes. An ordinance approving the amended and restated Great Western Annexation and Development Agreement and approving extended vested property rights as set forth therein. Robert Eck, Grow Land Acquisitions 2 LLC, the applicant's representative. This will require a supermajority vote as it is a second reading and legislative action. Mr. McCarter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is legislative action. It's required by statute that you take legislative action. And under the charter, you take legislative action in this context by ordinance. It's before you for second reading. It has not undergone any change since first reading, but let me again point out that the portion of this agreement that refers to statutory vested property rights is an important land use decision, or certainly an important legislative decision for you, because it freezes the regulatory landscape for this property for 25 years. It's a commitment the town makes to the landowner that we won't change the rules going forward unless those rules are changed town-wide and generally applicable to everyone. We can't isolate this property and change the rules, and that means for this board as well as any number of town boards that may sit in those chairs over the next 25 years. That promise is enforced under this agreement by damages in the event that a future land use decision denies the vested property rights that are in this agreement. So it really is an important step. It's an important document. And ordinarily what I would say is that we will sign this agreement and deliver what's promised here, but there are some things that are outside of your control and outside of the control of future town boards. And one is that if there is a citizen-initiated measure that overturns, or a referendum that overturns what you've done, then ultimately this could land in front of the courts, and I would have to, or my successor would have to argue that our hands are tied, we have to do what's in the agreement, yet the voters have instructed you otherwise. That puts us in a very difficult place. This agreement captures that situation by saying if that's the only way that we can deliver under those circumstances, the town will pay damages. Which could be significant. So that's why I keep emphasizing this to you. This is an important document. It's a development agreement really in name only, but this vested property rights portion of this is significant. There are development agreement characteristics, don't overlook that, having to do with everything from transportation planning and transportation infrastructure to rail quiet zones, to trails, to environmental and wildlife concerns. All of those things are captured in this agreement too. But the reason we had a public hearing 2 weeks ago and the reason why we're bringing this back on second reading is because this agreement contains vested property rights. The applicant's representatives are here this evening in case you have any further questions of them. My recommendation is that you do approve it on second reading. 5 votes will be required tonight, and you will need to take public comment. It's legislative action.
I do have to take public comment?
Yes,
yes.
Second reading.
Yeah. Okay, are there any questions or comments from the board? Okay. Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience who wishes to address the board on this ordinance issue this evening? Okay. Seeing none and seeing no comments or questions from the board, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2017-1551.
Second?
Motion on the floor for Mr. Rennemeyer and a second for Mr. Bennett, approving ordinance number 2017-1551. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 4, ordinance number 2017-1553, an ordinance amending specific sections of the Windsor Municipal Code with respect to post-approval document submittal requirements in land use matters. Again, this is first reading and legislative action with presentation this evening from Devin. Mr. King.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Town Board. This past August, Colorado Senate Bill 17129 was approved, amending the Colorado Revised Statutes regarding the recording and retaining of plats with the county clerk and recorder. This has prompted town staff to take a look at our own requirements and to revise those. We currently require Mylars, etc., for every improvement plan, any plans or plats that come in through the town. And as you have seen, the town is currently growing at a very fast pace, which means we are getting a lot of these documents. And our storage is becoming quite full. So the town would like to take advantage of that as well. Approximate cost to the town over the past year has been $3,431 for an additional storage cabinet. That's to store the Mylars in. And then $1,000 for Mylar hanging strips. These are very expensive strips that the Mylars require to hang in those storage cabinets. And along with that, we have spent over 120 hours of staff time scanning and hanging Mylars. Basically, with the passing of this ordinance, the idea would be that we would be able to change our standards and how we want final submittal documents to be submitted, so we can keep up with current trends and standards and technology as we move forward, as things change. Planning Commission has made a recommendation of approval. Are there any other questions?
Any questions from Mr. King? Okay, Mr. Rennemeyer.
Does this mean that they're going to start to be archived? Is this an archival thing, or is this just how they're submitted for final approval?
A little bit of both.
Are they going to be saved electronically instead of in hard copy Mylar? Is that what we're getting at?
Electronic is the goal, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Not, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2017-1553.
Second?
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Adams for ordinance number 2017-1553. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. We're moving on to item 5, which is the next of 4 site plan presentations. The first one is a site plan presentation for East Point subdivision, Lot 5, Janae Nequette, human being of Northern Colorado, the applicant, Patricia Croach, North Star Design Inc., the applicant's representative. I would remind all my fellow board members that this is the one and only opportunity we will have to look at these site plans. So tonight would be the night to give any feedback if you have any. So, Mr. Hornbeck.
Thank you, Mayor, Town Board. This site plan presentation has been reviewed in accordance with Article 9, Chapter 17 Municipal Code. The site is located south of Main Street, to the east of State Highway 257, and to the east of the Lakeview Cemetery in the new East Point subdivision that's under construction now. The site is currently zoned general commercial. The overall development characteristics include a lot of approximately 0.9 acres, approximately 23% landscaped area, a 690 square foot building with drive-through lanes on each side of the building, outdoor seating area, 12 parking stalls. Building characteristics include predominant building materials of wood siding, brick, and metal, building height of up to 18 feet, and a flat roof that's broken into 3 separate planes. The site plan with Main Street to the north, private interior drives of the subdivision providing access to the site with drive-through lanes around the building. The landscape plan is in accordance with town standards as well. The building elevations, you can see brick, some metal mixed with some of the wood panel as well. As you're aware, this is a site plan presentation for your information. Please pass on any comments, concerns you may have at this time for staff to address with the applicant. Project is in conformance with the comprehensive plan and is consistent with the strategic plan. And that's all I have for you on this item.
Okay, are there any questions?
I had a couple questions. Is this going to be their typical model where there's no interior seating?
There is no interior seating.
Okay.
There is outdoor seating.
And then the other question I had on this picture here, is there any concern that if the drive-through line on the left side backs up enough that it could be blocking the through lane for the other side to be able to loop around and get out? I mean, how many cars deep is that before you get to where it's single lane there?
If this area were blocked?
Like at the very top of the drive-through where it kind of 2 lanes is 1, before it goes back to 2.
Mm-hmm.
How many cars deep is that drive-through line on the left side where?
Sure. I think I'd have to defer to the applicant if they could speak to the vehicle stacking and their operational patterns.
Hi, I'm Janae. That stacking right there provided is roughly 6 cars. The nature of our business is speed. We've been double-sided drive-through for 12 years in northern Colorado, and this design gives us sufficient stacking on both sides.
Okay.
So, any further questions? No? Okay.
Any additional questions? Mr. Reiner and then Mr. Adams.
My question was, the location that's up off of Crossroads Boulevard, I know that's not this one, but, and I don't, maybe you don't have any affiliation with that one at all. I know that after it was built, I believe that this is the right location because I used to frequent there, that the parking lot had to be redone because of some flow pattern, I think, or something to that effect. Do you have any knowledge of that site and what, I mean, because it plays into probably what she's asking, and so that's why I...
Yes. So this site was designed specifically with intentions of not reaching the same issues we had at that previous site. That site had limitations based upon, we were unable to pull the building as far back from the road as it is in this location due to utility lines. And so we were forced to have it closer to the road. With the site plan approval through the city of Loveland, we decided to open it with which they approved, but it definitely had less stacking, had a tighter turn radius, and our intentions after opening were then to go forward with doing that second, which you're talking about on that side, that allows us a little bit easier turn radius and more stacking and avoids any issue with cars coming in touch with each other. So,
Sorry to catch you off guard with a question about the level of location.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
That's what I thought of when she asked her question. So I thought,
yeah, it was not ideal in Loveland, and we've definitely taken that into consideration and ensured that this site would not have those same issues.
Okay.
Yep,
Yeah.
Mr. Adams.
I have 2 questions. The first one, the exit on the north side, coming out north, is that going to be a right turn only onto 392?
Sorry, the right exit, I think that's off of Coffee Drive.
Yeah, as you're coming north, and there's the road 392. Is that going to be a right turn only?
That is what my understanding is of that. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I read that.
Yeah.
I thought that's what it said. But and then the other one is the entrance and exit off 257. That will be at the roundabout and using the roundabout to make that entrance and exit. Is that correct?
Yes, that is going to be down. There's another come and go development, so there's a little bit of space before that, but yes. Yeah. Any other questions?
Any additional questions?
No.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Ready to move on to the next one. Okay, item 6, site plan presentation for Eagle Crossing subdivision, 5th filing, Lot 2, Fuzzy's Restaurant, Martin Lind owner, Mark Rogers the applicant, Patricia Crutch, North Star Design, Inc. applicant's representative. And Ms. Berry will give staff presentation.
Hello, good evening, Mayor and trustees. This is a site plan presentation for Eagle Crossing Subdivision 5th filing. Just like the other site plans for qualified commercial industrial, it's reviewed with Article 9 of Chapter 17 of the Municipal Code. The site vicinity map is here. This is Fairgrounds Avenue and Crossroads, so we've seen this earlier tonight, so we're pretty familiar with the area. The site is located on the corner there. The zoning is general commercial. Basically, this is a project for Fuzzy's Taco Restaurant. It's approximately located on a 1.37 acre lot. It's got approximately 33% landscaped area. It's 5,715 square foot building, including on the site are 65 parking stalls. Building materials are a mix of wood, siding, and stucco in earth tone colors, and it has some metal accents. It's approximately 25 feet tall, also with a flat roof and a varying roof line. It has a covered entry and an enclosed outdoor patio area. Here's the site plan, again on Fairgrounds Avenue and Crossroads Boulevard. And the landscape plan also is in accordance with the municipal code. Building elevations, there's 2 slides here with some elevations. I do want to say that we are working with the applicant on some of these mix of materials. There's a little more stucco than the commercial corridor plan allows for, but we've been working pretty well together to get something that has the correct amount of stucco percentage that is allowed. Planning Commission was comfortable with that, and hopefully you will be too. So that is the presentation, and it's for your
Can you go
information.
back to the parking slide?
Sure. It's the combo, but there we go.
Okay. So the parking consists of everything on the east side and some on the north, or is it all on the east side?
And some on the north. You were right. It's an L shape around the building.
Okay.
And this is all for the Fuzzy's
It is
restaurant.
just exclusive for
Yes. The site that recently went through with an agreement with Brands Liquor is actually located over just to the east of the Brands, or northeast of this particular site.
Any questions? Ms. Sharman?
Am I viewing this correctly, that the access to the parking lot is from the interior roads? There's no direct access from Crossroads or from Fairgrounds?
That is correct. So we're shared access.
Do we know what the
Easement.
seating capacity of the restaurant will be?
The seating capacity, I'd have to ask the applicant for that information if he's willing to. You made it this long?
The applicant.
Might not have stayed. I do not know the seating capacity of it. I could find that out for you. Basically.
Well, I guess my question is just, how is the number of parking stalls required?
It's based on the restaurant square footage. Am I
Okay.
correct on that? And it's in excess of what is actually needed by code is what the applicant felt was appropriate for the lot, for his business.
Do you know how many would have required by code?
Not off the top of my head. I'd have to pull up the municipal code and do some math.
Okay. Does that conclude your questions, Ms. Sharman? Mr. Bennett?
I believe at the Plan Commission there was some question about roof design.
Yes.
To cover up some of the equipment.
It's
Has
a
that
good-
been resolved?
It's a good point. So in these elevations, there is some hint of seeing equipment on the roof.
Yeah.
And we have been working with the applicant as well to put some parapets up to be able to block those from view from the adjacent corridors and trail.
What view is that you're pointing to? Is that the
This
west view,
particular
east?
one it will be facing east into the parking lot area, this top one. The one on the bottom is facing west. One of the notes I should say is that these signs will go through a separate permitting system, and we are working with the applicant to have that meet sign code, which does not allow the particular vertical sign here to extend above the roof line.
Thank you.
Sure.
And are those garage doors that will open up into a patio seating outdoor area?
It is patio seating. I am not clear on if those are open, garage doors open. There's no indication on here that they do open, but there may be intent to.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments?
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Moving on then to item 7, site plan presentation for Falcon Point subdivision, second filing, lot 1, East Windsor Storage, Brandon Greb, the owner, Katie Thompson, Ripley Design Incorporated, the applicant, owner's representative, and Tony Olila, the authorized representative. Staff presentation from Ms. Berry. Ms. Berry?
Okay, great. Again, another qualified commercial site plan reviewed in accordance with Article 9 of Chapter 17 of the Municipal Code. This is another familiar area. We just looked at the human being site over here. This one's located just southeast of that. It is in the light industrial that is accessed off of Nanreen. So this is for a storage facility, internal storage of individual units. The lot itself is about 6.7 acres. There's proposed of 20% landscaped area. It's a 118, almost 119,000 square foot facility. Approximately 118,000 square feet is the actual storage areas, the enclosed internal storage areas, and also 1,000 square foot for the office. They're approximately 16 feet in height, except for some monument towers that are in the corners to gain some architectural interest to the project. They are storage units designed around the perimeter of the site with access off of Gyrfalcon Court. There's 6 parking spaces provided, and that also is according to municipal code for parking. There are 2 phases being proposed. There's an eastern portion of the site with about 65,000 square feet of storage and office space, and then a phase 2, which would be on the western portion of the site, about almost 55,000 square feet of storage. So here's the site plan. Again, up here would be 392 Main, about another property up, and then the access would actually be off of Gyrfalcon Court. Here's the total build-out area with the storage buildings around the perimeter and then some internal storage and an office. Here's the landscape plan, the total, and then we have the phase 1 area, which is what they'll do is put a portion of the landscaping in and then leave this undisturbed until phase 2 comes through. This was slightly revised after the presentation was first put in your packet, but I wanted to put that in here because there was a slight changes to the length of the building. There's a cut up here. The building elevations, this is the storage area, back of the storage area that would be facing the outside of the lot, and these are the towers that I mentioned in the corners, the office. So again, the building elevations, a mix of the stone veneer with stucco, metal roof, and then also some metal accents over on the office area. And I do want to say that while these are internal buildings, and mostly anything seen from the outside would be the stucco mixed with the stucco or veneer, stone veneer. The one thing I did want to mention was that the phase 1 exterior wall will be the mix of the veneer and the stucco and not a metal. So even with phase 1, it will look as if it was that solid band of the veneer and the stucco and a little bit of a metal accent. And here's a picture of what the gates would look like and also what the buildings are representative of. And again, that is the presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for this site plan presentation? So there is a management office on site?
Yes,
And will it be manned, what, during the day, 8 to 5, or?
that I'd have to ask the applicant
Okay.
for more information. He did stay.
Hey, I'm Tony. Yeah, so 9 to 6, Monday through Saturday, and then 9 to 4. Or sorry, Monday through Friday, and then Saturday 9 to 4, closed on Sundays.
Okay, and are any of the units temperature controlled?
Yeah, there'll be 2 buildings, 2 or 3 buildings that are climate controlled, all one level. Yep.
Madam
Yes, Mr. Anderson.
Mayor, may I ask, have you done other storage areas in Windsor?
Not Windsor.
I'm
Not in Windsor.
Not in Windsor.
Any additional questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 8, site plan presentation for Westwood Village subdivision, 8th filing, independent living and nursing facility, 14th Street Real Estate LLC, Columbine Health Systems, the owner applicant, Kathy Mathis, TB Group, the applicant's representative. Again, Ms. Berry.
Right. Again, this commercial site plan was reviewed in accordance with Article 9 of the Chapter 17 of the Municipal Code. This site is located on the more western side of Main Street, over by 15th. You might recall that the Columbine medical offices are over in this location. The site is zoned general commercial, and with the patio homes that was recently done, RMU below it. So this is a mix of 2 buildings on this site. One is a assisted living facility, one is an independent living area, or I should say the first one's a nursing facility, skilled nursing facility. The overall development characteristics include about a 3.4 acre site, 30% landscaping, those two-story buildings with a combined footprint of 54,631 square feet. The nursing facility would be fronting Main. It's about 56 units. Along 14th Street will be the independent living facility. It's got approximately 31 units, actually exactly 31 units. That independent living facility also includes amenity space. There's 69 parking spaces on site with an additional 20 spaces available at the Windsor Medical Clinic to the west that are not associated or required for that site plan that can be used for this site plan according to our code. Both buildings would be accessed off of 14th Street on a private drive. The architectural design and themes that are were used to be compatible with and complementary to the existing Columbine columns, which is the area right immediately adjacent to this property. It's a mix of masonry brick, lap siding, panel siding, metal, and shingle roof, all in earth tones, and I actually do have a color board if you are interested in that. The building heights, there's 37 feet for the independent living facility, which is the one that is along 14th, and then this 35 feet for the skilled nursing facility. A height waiver was approved by the Planning Commission at its December 6th meeting to allow for this height. The commercial corridor plan limits the height to 30 feet off of the Main Street 392. I'll show you with the architectural design that will help support the building height change. There is a pitched roof and a covered entry feature, and the Planning Commission also approved a reduced setback to 15.3 feet at the southwest corner and 18.1 feet at its northwest corner. So here's the site plan. Right here is where the offset was reduced from down to 18.1 feet up in this corner, and then down to, I forgot what it is, 15.3 feet in this corner. So here's the Main Street, 14th Street access off of the private drive into the internal parking lot. Skilled living or skilled nursing along Main, and the independent living along 14th. And here's the landscape plan. Here's some perspectives of the buildings, independent living, skilled nursing. Some more elevations. Here's some of the elevations. This is independent living along 14th. The pitched area, a couple reasons for it. One is because of the requirements for the building code to have with the medical facilities. They need extra room in the floor areas and the roof area to allow for the equipment. Another aspect is that the pitched area that would get up to that 5 to 7 difference for what the commercial corridor plan called for is set back in the roof. It's pitched back, so it's not immediately vertical on the ground. And here's the independent living facility. Oh, that's a side view, sorry. And here's the skilled nursing facility along Main. Another reason for the height, which was 35 along Main, is to use some parapet to help with the articulation along the building facade and also to hide some of the rooftop mechanical. This is where the offset was allowed, and one of the reasons it was considered is the fact it stepped down to a one-story height adjacent to that boundary that is associated with any other property. And here's a side view. So, again, this is for your informational purposes, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
And then Mr. Rennemeyer.
Well, I have a question, I guess maybe you can call it a comment. I'm kind of concerned as to how tall this is right up along Main. It just seems odd that they would have the complex that they've put in, you know, the independent living, I guess is probably what it is, that's back behind this, between there and the single family residential, and that they would have this right up along 392, almost, I mean, it, just looking at like.
Go back to that site drawing.
Sure.
It just seems, I mean, well, I mean, that one that was kind of from a different perspective right there. I mean, I'd like to see the view on the other side, like if you're over at, you know, King Soopers or Walgreens or something, looking back over at this, because those buildings, I don't know, I'm just surprised that they've laid it all. I mean, maybe they had to with the way the streets were and everything. I guess I was surprised. I was going to ask about the height, and then you got to the reason that the Planning Commission, you know, was recommending approval of the variance, just given the height up along our main street.
Would you like the applicant to address that question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, sure.
There in the Columbine Commons, pardon me on the name of these, I'm still getting used to the different development types, 2 down, or 2 to the west. Correct me if I'm wrong, there was a height variance allowed for one of those structures as well? Otherwise, it's due to the fact they needed the extra room according to building code for that type of medical facility. And they did the effort of setting back whatever's in excess of 30 feet from the road. General commercial zone does allow up to 45. If that helps at all or hinders this, but.
Okay, Mr. Adams and then Ms. Sharman.
All right, I just wondered, I didn't read anything about a therapy pool or a pool in either of the buildings. Have they talked about, particularly in the skilled building?
Not that I know of. The information that I was provided has been put into this presentation. So the amenities were a combination of the library, teaching kitchen, media room. I know that's therapy, but if it's there, I apologize. The applicant's not here to answer that question.
Okay.
Curious but surprised.
Can you go back to the slide that had the kind of vicinity map?
Sure.
Yeah. So, kind of in relation to Paul's question, I think the facility that's right at 15th and Main, I think has a similar height because it's 2 stories, 2 bedrooms.
No, that's a single story that faces up against Main there.
Is it?
The one she was just pointing at, right there, that's only one story that backs up to Main.
Okay.
Perhaps it was
There's
this
that block area there.
But my question that I had, and I'm not sure if this is a concern, if it's a issue with Columbine or if it's an issue with UC, the medical clinic that's in between these two, or if they're even associated. But the medical clinic has signage up saying, you know, we're proud to be a non-smoking campus. So all their employees go across 14th Street and stand around on that curb where this new construction is going to happen to smoke during their breaks. And I don't know if there's a way to address that, or, you know, if that's, you know, if Columbine will tell UC Medical, hey, keep your people off our property, or how that's addressed. But just a concern to put out there is that they frequently do that, so that they're now off campus to do their smoking. And so I don't know if one of those entities, both of those entities maybe needs to provide something for their employees so that that doesn't continue to be an issue, but.
I can relay that to the applicant. Not sure the behavior is something I can control with a site plan, but I can definitely convey the sentiment.
Yeah, and maybe just something for them to be aware of to discuss with their future neighbors too, but.
Sure.
Okay, Mr. Bennett?
Yeah, I heard regarding the reduction in setback, a couple of things. I heard this at the Planning Commission, but could you, for the benefit of all of us, tell us, first of all, why that was recommended and the setback? And my question then is, how are we protected from not having a precedent that other developments want to have a reduced setback?
The discussion that we had with the Planning Commission was on that, the language of the code that allows the Planning Commission to allow, I should back up, the setback requirement is, or offset, the side setback offset is 20 feet unless Planning Commission allows for a lesser offset. The minimum would be 10 feet. That's what the code says. I don't have the history on why that language was used, but some of the things that we talked about with Planning Commission is that it doesn't have the same, it does not come with the same list of criteria that you see with the height or waiver, the height waiver, or like with a variance. The gentleman that came up here was talking about variances. He said hardship and has criteria. Those are things that were spelled out. This doesn't have that that condition in there. So basically, we were looking at its impact to the neighbor, particularly the one to the east. And some of the discussion on that was that this is actually a commercially zoned property that is likely to redevelop. The other aspect we're looking at was it functions as a multifamily use and not so much commercial use. And in the multifamily zone, the setback is half a foot for every foot of building. So if it was addressed with that kind of use in mind, it would meet the setbacks. Landscaping and other buffers would help too. So that was the discussion on that.
So if I understand that right, the criteria would be this is a multifamily.
It functions as a
It's not a zone
multifamily use.
but in practice, it's a multifamily facility versus a coffee shop or a realty firm or a commercial building.
Correct.
So that's the difference, and that gives us some criteria of protection from future requests for setbacks.
Yes, please.
Am I on track?
Yeah, so that language was added to the code a decade ago, where the Planning Commission and Town Board felt as though the 20 feet was excessive in some cases. In hindsight, there should have been criteria associated with that when that code amendment allowed for the Planning Commission that latitude to go down to a 10-foot offset, but it's essentially been looked at as on a site-by-site basis if there aren't any easements or other negative impacts to the neighbors, then the setback or the offset can be reduced to 10 feet as long as it's not causing a hardship for anybody or causing any issues for anybody. So that's how it's been looked at. We'll be addressing that in the code update. But yeah, we do look at each and every one of those requests on a case-by-case basis on their own merit, so we don't look at it as being something that's setting a precedent.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well,
Mr. Reiner?
I want to circle back on something just to get clarification. So what did you call it, the commercial corridor plan, or what, is that what you called it, commercial corridor?
Did I get?
Which currently allows up to 30 feet, is that what you said?
The general commercial zone allows up to 45 feet, but in this particular area along the commercial corridor Main Street, it restricts it further down to 30 feet.
Okay.
Unless they get planning commission waiver for a variance in the height, or not a variance, a waiver on the height.
So at this particular block or whatever, it was only up to 30?
The whole commercial
The whole
corridor.
Okay.
Along with several other commercial corridors.
Okay. Thank you.
Including your downtown.
Okay. Anything else concerning this site plan? Okay, moving on to item 9, resolution number 2017-111. A resolution approving a final site plan for Grasslands Park subdivision, second filing Lot 1, Joseph Schrader, the owner applicant, Patricia Croach, North Star Design Incorporated, the applicant's representative. Quasi judicial with Ms. Malone giving presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Town Board. The item before you is final site plan for multifamily development. It was reviewed in accordance with Article 7, Chapter 17 of the Municipal Code, outlining the process and criteria for site plan. The property is located west of 7th Street, also 257, west of Windsor Lake, and just north of the railroad tracks, and close to the Birch Street alignment. The neighborhood that you can see there that is located here, this is the Grassland Park subdivision. This area consists of single family, and over in this area there are 4 multifamily buildings that have already been built. One is in the permit stages in this location. Now this site is owned by a different owner. There is an existing, and I have pictures to follow, but existing open space and playground area here in this area. And it was site planned in 2002. So essentially the applicant has taken the old plans and we've brushed those off, and they've brought those up to conform with existing codes. The site is still zoned residential mixed use. And this shows here the existing playground area and open space. That this area will remain open, and then these addresses here symbolize the buildings that were previously approved. This view here is of the existing single family just west of the site and north. This is a view looking at the school district property to the southwest and south here towards the railroad tracks, and this is a view east towards Windsor Lake. Just a couple shots from the existing development. Again, this structure is already located on the property just north. This is a picture of one of the existing multifamily buildings. And again, another one's in progress, different ownership. The buildings that are proposed with this final site plan are similar to what you see here. They're similar to what was, or actually exactly the same as what was approved back in 2002. So the site is 3.4 acres. There are 4 buildings proposed. One is an eightplex and the other 3 are sixplexes. There's 56 units, each have 2 bedrooms, and the area of those units will consist of 808 square feet. Over half of the site is landscaped, and that includes the playground and open space area shown. There's only 16.3% building coverage, and the site does meet the current code standards for the 450 square feet per living unit, as well as the lot area of 1,400 square feet per unit. It's a 2-story, 19 foot 6 inches building height, and there are 105 parking spaces, 84 required, and of those parking spaces, 12 are accessible. And here is the site plan. It's got 16-plex, and over to the west, the 8-plex. And again, this area will remain open, and this is the existing playground is right here, and this is the covered picnic area. And this is 7th Street to 57. And here's the landscape plan. This also was approved back in 2002, but some modifications were made to accommodate some new fire lines, as well as providing more drought-tolerant plants from the previous plan. And the elevations, and these have not changed since the 2002 plan, and these will match what's out there currently. So the site plan, it does conform with the comprehensive plan, both chapter 5B, the growth framework, with the goal of maintaining the community while accommodating future growth that is fiscally and environmentally responsible, prioritizing new growth in areas currently served by town infrastructure and services, and chapter 5C, with the goal of providing diverse housing and residential neighborhoods to meet the needs of varying family sizes, lifestyles, and income levels. Also would like to note that this site plan is near, again, Windsor Lake, also the trail system, as well as walkable to downtown, Boardwalk Park, much commercial and other mixed-use nodes. So at the December 6th meeting, the Planning Commission forwarded to the Town Board a recommendation of approval of the final site plan as submitted with resolution number 2017-112, with the condition that any remaining Planning Commission comments were addressed. Planning Commission did not have any additional comments. Staff requests that the following be entered into the record: the application, supplemental materials, the staff memos, and supporting documents, Planning Commission's recommendation, and the testimony heard during the public meeting. And the applicant is here tonight. Thank you, Joe.
It's hanging in there. Okay.
Quick question. Your slide here where it says resolution number 2017-112, is that a different resolution than the one we're on? Or is that just a mistake on the numbering, or are they both one and the same? I'm looking at resolution.
Same thing, because the agenda says 111.
Should be 111. Sometimes when we're putting together packet materials, we're all working different areas, and so.
I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something different that was something that the Planning Commission was looking at.
No, I probably put this presentation together before the numbering was finalized.
That's fine. I just
Sorry
was
about
clarifying.
that.
That's just clarifying. I wasn't trying to.
Mr. Adams?
Carolyn, how did the planning department feel about 450 square feet for, it says 450 square feet unit. Is that 450 square feet per unit?
No, that is a code item that talks about livable open space area. It's not for the individual unit. No, it's talking about the exterior open space. Items that can be included could be patios, porches, decks, or just open space as provided here with the playground equipment and covered picnic area.
That has the same thing to do with the 1,400 square feet per unit on the next item, next line?
This is regarding the overall parcel size, so it does comply with that as well. Now, the actual square footage of the units will be 808 square feet.
Yeah, that's what you're asking about, it's the 808 up above. You're not on, are you on our slide?
Well, I think so.
Yes, he was asking about this item right here, the 450 square feet per unit, and that's an open space requirement.
You know, the one he's looking at, I don't know what slide he's looking at, it doesn't say the in parentheses area of unit 808. I don't know if that's a different version.
Well, I don't see an 808 yes, I do too up above it. 56 units each.
You're looking at a slide that doesn't match what we're looking at here. Or not a slide, but that's in the packet tonight.
Mhm.
I'm looking at the presentation, you're looking at the packet, it doesn't have that parenthesized.
Well, that's why I was concerned when I read it this weekend, and I thought 450, that's not even enough room to turn around.
Right, no, that's referring to the outside.
Okay, well, Paul was pointing out this other slide, the site plan, but what am I looking at then?
The packet for tonight, packet for tonight didn't have the parenthesized 808 square feet. If I look at our packet, your slide has the 808 square feet. That's why he's looking.
And I'm looking at site plan summary too. So I was just concerned about the 450 square feet, and I know how many my townhome is, and it's a lot more than that. I can hardly turn around sometimes. So.
Any other questions, Mr.
No,
Adams?
I'm fine with that.
Questions on this side?
No.
Okay. On Durham Street, is there two entry and exit points? Is that what I'm seeing into this complex? And each one, there's only, like that very first one, there's only one. Can you drive around back behind these buildings so there's two entry, or is there only one entrance into all of these? An exit point.
So there's an exit point here, and there's one here as well as over here.
Oh, so there's actually three.
Mm-hmm.
And all three of them will be exit and entrance? They're not going to be
Yes.
okay. That's all the questions I had. Okay. Seeing nothing further, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 2017-111.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor for Mr. Rennemeyer and a second for Mr. Adams approving resolution number 2017-11. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the resolution passes unanimously. Before we move on to item D, communications, there were a couple of additional items in our packet. There was the police department report. Chief, did you have anything you wanted to bring to our attention in that, or any questions for Chief concerning that report? Okay. Mr. Rennemeyer.
I've got to be the oddball and ask a question about it. One of the, and we could talk, I guess, off record about this, but since it's up, here we go. My question, not to get graphic or anything, was the concern about, I know you had said, in your wording, and I'm sorry, I just remembered when she had brought this report up, was about sexual assaults or something like that. I know it said something about that there was yet to be determined or something like that, or?
It was still under investigation.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
Others investigated and yet to be determined. I don't know. That was a question that I could have asked you offline or something. I was just curious what, not necessarily about the case necessarily, but.
I understand.
It just caught I was like, oh boy, what's, anyhow, I think you said somewhere in there about teenagers or something like that. And so, anyhow, that was.
Yes, the juvenile.
Okay, is that it? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. It's a great report.
I appreciate it.
Sorry to bring you down for that, Chief.
There was an item also in here for water rate and fee adjustment, and I guess based on the fact that Mr. Moyer is hearing this late hour, he must need some direction from the board with concerning this. So, Mr. Moyer.
I wanted you to know, as an update, what we've been working on as far as water rates. We had a kind of a two-pronged attack going. The first portion addresses the monthly user rates. Usually this time of year, we look at this, we put together our plan, gather our costs from our suppliers for next year. We did that. We got the final price last week from Northweld. We figure what it's going to cost us, and historically, any increases we pass along to the consumers. Also, if it's a decrease, we pass it along to the consumer. The difference being if our cost to buy our supply goes down, we usually pass it along in that next year. The past few times our cost has gone up, we have skipped a year and passed it and started it in the following year. Meaning, in this case, this year our weighted average cost was going to be up almost 5%. So what I was proposing here is that we would, instead of starting it in January of 2018, we skip ahead and start it in January of 2019. So that's what this memo says. So on Wednesday, we have the Water and Sewer Board meeting. Is that right? And this same memo is in their packet. So I was going to go and talk to them, tell them the same thing. I guess it got kind of odd that the days got crossed up here. Usually we have the Water and Sewer Board here this before you guys, but I wanted to let you know what I was going to be discussing with them, and before I got too far down the road, if you guys did not support that as a plan to move forward.
My question is, what's it costing the town to be paying the higher rate next year but not collecting the higher rate?
It
Do we have any projection on what that's going to be?
I think it'd be about another 150,000, something like that, based on what we bought this past year. Which I think we can hold, huh?
Go ahead.
No, which we have a sufficient enough fund balance that I think we can absorb that through the next year and then bump it up for January of 2019.
Would there be a concern for 2019 that we don't know about, that we'd be implementing this one and maybe something else that would make it even higher?
Well, if it turns out next year, at this time next year, we're having the same discussion, what we've done in years past is we would implement this one, 4.9, and if, say, we find out this time next year, water in 2019 is going to cost us another 5%. We wouldn't do 10% in 1 year. We'd do this 5, keep track, and then do the next 5 in the following year. It makes more bookkeeping work for us, but it kind of smooths out the plane as far as increases go.
Why wouldn't we phase it in? Why wouldn't we do a partial increase in 18?
We could do that if you like.
I'm just thinking from a consumer standpoint.
So, because I mean,
better for the consumer.
Yeah, are you recommending no increase in 2018?
I'm sorry.
Are you recommending no increase in 2018? Static, we just proceed status quo?
That's what I was saying.
But pretty soon we're going to have to increase it by at least 5.
Yeah, because it's costing us 5 more.
I'm just trying to think, as a consumer, would I rather get hit with 5 13 months from now, or 2%? I don't know.
We can, one of the things that Dean and I talked about was we're ready to we're rolling out the increased stormwater rates starting the first of the year.
True.
And we've been trying to, Jess Shetner, who works in my department, has been going to some conferences and sessions about how to roll out new fees to your municipality. And one of the things that she's learned through these classes is you don't roll out too much at one time. It gets confusing for them. And we knew that you had already adopted the stormwater fees. We also know that Dean is working on a water rate study. So we're not even sure where that's going to pan out. So we were thinking, we were trying to think, so yeah, we know we have to roll out the stormwater rates because those have already been adopted and approved by the town board. So this is something we could look at again in a couple months once the water rate study's done, and probably come up with some sort of game plan, whether that's phasing in or whatever that is. But in order to, we know that if we would send a notice out to our water customers and say, yes, your stormwater rates are going up and your consumption rates are going up, they get pretty concerned pretty quickly, even if it's a nominal amount.
Do you recall what our stormwater rate increase is, that percentage? That we are raising it?
I don't remember the percentage, but I seem to think that the monthly fee may have been close to double.
Yeah, but the rate, it's nominal. So it's changing from $3 to $6 or something like that. But it's an increase. And, everything that we went through with the road impact fee, which is a much larger scope, but, we were trying to think of how we could roll this out to our citizens in a more palatable way, especially this time of year. So, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No.
The part that, it was a good segue by Patty there, because the other part that we've been working, the other part, water concern that we've been talking about or working on and studying, goes back to that meeting we had in Severance. I think it was in July. We were talking about the regional water plant and also that NISP project at the same time. Our tap fee now is basically a two-part fee. So our regular tap hookup fee to hook up to our system. And a couple of years ago, we started adding $475 per tap fee in order to pay for the NISP project. Now, if that project it'll be decided here sometime in 2018, and the money that we've collected through that $475 per tap, that's only been paying our annual bills up until now. If that project gets approved, where that portion of the tap fee is gonna have to be raised and a considerable amount. So with that in mind, and we're trying to smooth it in for the consumers, because if we are working on that plan that we can pay for the NISP program, we can pay for our portion of the regional water plant and keep up with our water treatment all in one package. But it's not going to be a small package is what I'm saying. So we can afford to delay it for a year on this 4.97 rate. If you'd rather not go that way, we won't go that way.
And you're presenting this to the Water and Sewer Board, or you already have?
No, the dates got backwards, so I'm going to present it to them
this
on
week.
Wednesday, yes.
Yeah, we just received the information.
I guess I'd like to
last week.
see what their recommendation would be.
Because we
Would
could
be my
always,
thoughts.
yeah, we could always,
I think I appreciate what you've done here, and I would say maybe we just kind of move with your recommendation unless, Water and Sewer Board sees something very differently that we aren't recognizing this evening.
absolutely.
Unless board members feel something else.
Is there a chance that the storm drainage fee could go up again in 2019? I just worry that we're putting off the inevitable here, and we could get behind the 8 ball if we don't do, even if it's uncomfortable, do what needs to be done.
We don't plan to do another study that soon.
was a full study.
Okay.
If I recall, one of the questions we asked Mr. Wagner was if that fee would take us to wherever the projection was, 2040 or whatever.
See, my only concern with the tap fee, since that's kind of tied to the new construction and some of the comments as far as NISP, is that depending on where that project goes and how quickly it goes, that could need to be increased drastically. And one of the things that came out of our road impact fee discussion with developers is they would rather see that small increase over a longer time than just all of a sudden boom. So I just wonder if with the tap fee, if that shouldn't be on our horizon, because even if NISP just self-destructs, we're gonna need water from somewhere, and it's gonna need treated somehow, and there's gonna be costs associated with it. So that would be my only concern, is do we need to just kind of keep gradually ratcheting up that tap fee so that we aren't having that same issue where we let it be stagnant for too long and then we're gonna have to take a huge jump.
Yeah, and maybe, I just speak in terms of NISP being the project at hand right now. Maybe just call that portion of our tap fee, water capacity fee or something like that. Whatever we want to call it. I just call it NISP because that's how it got started.
Dean, do you have a date when that water study will be prepared and ready?
Yeah, we were going to plan work sessions in, what they put together for us was a model where we can adjust things. You know, one of the questions I gave them, I said, what if we keep the monthly increase on the rates at 5% constantly, you know, for 20 years? We keep our portion of the tap fee that we do not use for NISP steady in that time too. Right now we have that $475 NISP fee. What would we have to increase that fee to make it pay for everything? And of course it was enormous, you know. But the point of that story is that the model that they built for us, we can adjust any of those things. You know, we can say, okay, we got to go to 10% per year on the rates. We're not going to have this many building permits, on and on. But to answer your question, it's ready to go. We just got crammed up near the end of the year here. So I felt that rather than roll out that whole NISP program here before the end of the year, we still have some time. January and February, we would like to get some work sessions with you and the Water and Sewer Board and we'll show you what we have and get more of a philosophical discussion on how to proceed on that.
One procedural question. If we were to decide, figuring out all the fees, to start phasing things in, does it have to be in January, or can we do it in March or April or September? Are we locked into a schedule?
We're not locked into it, but it works out better if we do it effective before people start watering their lawns.
Gotcha.
You know, it's just kind of a crummy move, I guess. Let people start watering their lawn and then bump it up in the middle of the summer.
Yeah, the sensitivity to the consumer,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Appreciate that. Okay.
So if we set it for a January work session, we would have time for implementation if needed?
I'm asking what may be a complex question here, but so the town absorbs that undercharging that we're talking about in 2018, assuming that for the whole year we don't collect that extra almost 5%. And let's say that this $475 NISP fee we've been collecting, let's say NISP does self-destruct and NISP doesn't happen, do we refund every $475 fee to everybody who's paid it because the project never went forward?
No, you know.
And where would that put the fund? Because we've eaten $150,000 over a year, and then we'd have to end up at some point in the future, it may not be in the same year, but would end up having to refund that.
Well, break that into a couple parts. If that if that does self-destruct and we have been collecting those fees, we still have been paying in fees. We've been paying for 10, 15 years. We've only had that fee in place for 2 or 3.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess what would happen if NISP is dead, we would have to we'd stop collecting that and not call it a NISP fee anymore because that project is done. Then when the next discussion we would have is, as Cindy was saying, well, if NISP is gone, we still need water. Where do we go from here?
I just didn't know if, because we were calling it a NISP fund, if NISP didn't happen, if we had to end up somehow reimbursing everybody that paid that fee.
No, I don't think so, because not everybody has paid it. You know, people that, like, for instance, I built our place in 1999. We didn't have that portion of the fee until I think it was 2015 or 2014. So
I just didn't know if that boiled on a legal question or whatever on how that was worded and how that.
Well, that's why I like that suggestion of maybe renaming that fee to a water capacity fee, so that because we have a water, I guess, issues and plans that we need to look at, irregardless of if we have NISP or not. And even if we have NISP, we still have other water capacity problems to solve.
Well, he used a term like water storage fee or something like that.
Something like that, yeah, or capacity fee.
Capacity fee or whatever.
Which, by the way, since we're talking water, in talking with Severance and Eaton, who we formed that kind of water coalition with, if you remember, we had a certain number kind of earmarked in our budget for a certain, perhaps, purchase and my understanding is we're very close to, I don't know if whoever has gotten wind of that, but Eaton and Severance have told me they're very close to identifying that and completing that, so.
Okay.
That process. Anything else for Dean, or do you need anything else from us? It sounds like you're moving status quo unless I'm seeing something else. Is that a consensus?
Well, I think we said we wanted to hear
What
the
water
was.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I thought it was kind of
recommends.
pending us meeting with them in a work session.
I heard Patty
Well,
say.
no,
that
we're not
looking at-
meeting it. He's gonna present it to
He's gonna
them
present
this
water and
Wednesday.
sewer.
Oh, yeah, but no, I thought they said
Different
something about a work session in January.
And then,
In January about the NISP fees.
Oh, okay.
yeah, but you gotta make a decision kind of how you're moving forward at the end of this year, and I think based on after you present to them, unless they say something drastically different, we're gonna move status quo for right now.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Thanks, Dean.
Anything else? Okay, item D, communications from town attorney.
Well, it's hard to believe it's the end of the calendar year, and this is our last meeting of the year. I do want to thank you and thank the citizens of Windsor for giving me the opportunity to serve as the town attorney this year, and I look forward to next year. Our first meeting in 2018 is January 4th?
8th.
8th.
The 8th.
Yeah, I've got my dates mixed up.
I like it.
It'll be
Please do
here.
not push me.
It'll be here before we know it, and I look forward to that. That's all I've got tonight.
Okay, communications from town staff. Anything, Mr. Wagner? Ms. Hodling? Chief?
Merry Christmas.
Okay. Mr. Moyer?
And Happy New Year.
Mr. Bolstead? Okay, communications from acting town manager, Ms. Garcia.
So I've heard back from Mr. Wes LaVinci, and he is available on Wednesday at 1 p.m. to meet with you all, so I will post it as a work session for you to meet with him, and I will reach out to Miles and let him know, and part of the packet will include his resume and cover letter.
Okay. Communications from town board members. Just wanna
Merry
remind-
Christmas to everyone.
Okay, Mary. It is Coffee with the Mayor this Saturday from 7:30 to 9. I believe it's at Starbucks, at the Safeway Starbucks, I believe. I wanted clarification, so because I think I might have said president to my MPOs. So I'm coming in as vice chair.
Yep, that's what you said.
And then chair. Did I say that? Okay, I'm thinking, did I say, okay, I just want to make sure I didn't say the wrong thing.
I wrote it down, that's what you said.
There is a president, but I'm not the president. I'm only the And I want to thank all the staff for your patience this evening and sticking with us through this long meeting, and wish everybody a safe and happy and blessed holiday season. And I would seek a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor for adjournment, vote yes, opposed no.
Did you say no?
Okay, good. And we are officially adjourned. Thank you.